Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the October 20th Cincinnati School Board meeting to order. I apologize that we are coming out of exec session late, so I apologize to everyone. Rob, were you ready? I'm sorry. Okay. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our wonderful students from one of our wonderful schools who are leading us virtually.
So I'm happy to share that today, the students from South Avondale Middle School, where April Simmons is the principal, will be leading us in our pledge.
Please rise.
Join me, class, as we do our version of the Pledge of Allegiance. That's the South Avondale Middle School version. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag.
to the flag
Of the United States.
of the United States
Of America.
of America
And to the republic.
and to the republic
For which it stands.
for which it stands,
One nation under God.
one nation under God,
Indivisible.
indivisible,
With liberty.
with liberty
And justice.
and justice
For all.
for all.
Excellent. I like that.
All right, now we got a little competition going on here because I'm liking the versions. I'm liking the versions. Treasurer Gustin, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Craig? Here. Mr. Crossett? Here. Mr. Lindy? Here. Ms. Mapp?
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Here.
Vice President Bolton?
Present.
President Moffett?
Here. Vice President Bolton, please share the expectations around the hearing of the public.
Thank you very much. I certainly will. Members of the public who are online and wish to speak during our hearing of the public this evening may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your requests for 5 minutes. If you would like a direct response to your questions, please make sure that you share your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information.
Wow, that was quick. I need a motion and a second to approve the October 20th business meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Treasurer Gustin, please call the voting roll.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett? Yes. Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Bolton?
Yes.
President Moffett?
Yes, and just like that, tonight's agenda is approved as posted. Do board members have any acknowledgements or announcements? I just need to be like on a swivel, back and forth. All right, Superintendent Murphy, please present any announcements or retirements that you may have.
I would like to start by acknowledging one certificated personnel who is retiring, and that is Susan Sure, a psychologist in our Department of Student Services. Congratulations to her. And then I do have one, actually, I'll make 2 announcements if that's okay. The first that is in the deck is recognizing that Spencer Center has been named one of Greater Cincinnati's best elementary schools by Niche, a leading school ranking platform. This naming is based on a detailed analysis of state test scores, student-teacher ratios, student diversity, and student-parent reviews. I don't know, I'm thinking, Rob, that may be on the next slide. I'm sorry. There we go, yes. So congratulations to Spencer Center. And then I just want to make mention of, on last Thursday night, our athletic department, led by Mr. Josh Harden, had our induction, and so appreciate all of those who were able to attend, and congratulations to our new inductees.
And I apologize, I was not able to get my pictures into Rob in enough time, but I do want to say I attended the Athletic Hall of Fame. It was awesome. It was unfortunately on the same day as the Bengals-Steelers game, so I was on a quick in and out. And the Brandy Monica concert, so it had to be quick for me, but it was good. And I also want to say, I attended with Assistant Superintendent Randolph, Superintendent Murphy, and my colleague, Mr. Crossett. It was a great, great time. And I did not submit my pictures in enough time, but I had an opportunity to hear from one of our colleagues as a keynote speaker for the Guiding Light Mentoring Program, and she did an awesome job. And we had one young student, would you like to speak on it, who was an AWL student who was considered the mentee of the year.
Yeah, it was an extremely, very, well, I would say an outstanding program in which Guiding Light Mentoring, they honored a mentor and a mentee of the year. And this little girl from AWL came up in her crown and she was owning it and just was very excited to just share the great journey that she has had with her mentor. So kudos to her. And I think for our next meeting, we'll make sure to have at least a picture and her name as well to share.
All right. We are now at the item on the agenda where I turn it over to Vice President Bolton for the hearing of the public.
Thank you very much. We are now at the item of our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will address all comments to the presiding officer. If you have any materials or presentations or wanting to be distributed to the board, please give them to Board Administrative Assistant Ms. Davis, who is here in the second row somewhere there. She'll raise her hand when she comes in. If you're online, once a request to speak has been granted, you'll be invited to enter. You should click on the camera icon to go interactive. Provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you want a response or to any of the questions you might raise. This request is consistent with board protocol. We appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each person will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel matters. After speaking, if you're online, you'll briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to live stream meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners, and we remind everyone that the 2-minute requirement is not a limit on the president of Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. Tonight we have 2 members live, and do we have anybody online? Oh, we have 1 speaker. Great. And that is Miss Jackson, Erica Jackson. Come on down to the podium. We welcome you and are happy to be here with you. And also might want to make reference, perhaps President Moffitt might want to make reference to the folks that are in the audience with the same T-shirt.
We're going to give their director of CPEN 2 minutes to speak about why
Excellent.
they're here. So we'll put Mrs. Davis on there as well.
Perfect. Oh, excellent.
I can go
Welcome.
whenever.
You go.
Hello, I'm a mother of 7. I have one who just graduated from Hughes last year. We are having a big issue with the IEPs. The IEP is something that parents aren't aware of our rights behind it, though there's laws that stand behind our children with disabilities, and these children are being pushed to the side. I had to even go get somebody to advocate for me outside of myself for my children, but we're not even aware that there are laws that stand behind us and our children are being left behind. So my question is, if it can be answered, if the staff can be retaught these different laws and these different regulations that support these children with these learning disabilities so they don't keep falling behind. And my last question is about the homeless parking lot. My question is anybody considering the trauma that these children will withstand sleeping in cars, and how we've had to do this also in our own lives, sleeping in cars when we haven't had stuff. I've been homeless, I've slept in shelters, I've been in the street with my kids, but the trauma is just what we're healing from just now because I signed my children up. I know there's therapists and psychiatrists, but if the parents don't give acknowledgement or consent, then the children aren't getting the help that they need. So as a parent, I'm here for everybody because we don't know all of the information that supports us as well as their parents. And we just trying to advocate for our kids, but if we advocate for our kids and we're not being heard, we're left with no other choices or options to make for our children.
Thank you
So
very much.
those were my two questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Appreciate it. And now this is Ms. Davis. Okay.
Hello, members of the board. So my name is Christian Davis, and I'm the CEO and founder of Cincinnati Parent Empowerment Network. We are the largest parent-led organization here in the city with over 26,000 families in our network. We've recently launched a 8-week paid parent fellowship training. So in the audience today, we have our first cohort. So over the next 8 weeks, we will be educating parents on how to navigate through the education system, as well as how to become more civically engaged, because we believe that both of those go hand in hand. So we are excited. This is our first field trip, so to speak. Many of the parents in the room have never been to a school board, and so today they are really just here for observation, to learn the structure of the board, to look at the agenda, to learn who the board members are. They were also given an observation sheet as well. So thank you so much for having us, and we will follow up with the email to each of you just to kind of keep you updated of our progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to everybody.
That concludes the portion of hearing of the public. Well, I
This is
particularly
scary
like all
quick.
those T-shirts out
Yeah,
there.
that's a nice color blue. It's nice to look out and see some blue. Let's see. Superintendent Murphy, we're on you. Please introduce your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. So Jeremy Gollyhue is going to join me for this presentation, but this is work that we started late last school year into the summer with the senior leadership team, as well as the directors of the district and some of our managers, looking at our district resources. And so this is including the work that we've done looking at our data for the school year, and then moving towards our strategic plan for this upcoming school year. So I will turn it over to Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Murphy, and good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure and privilege to be able to introduce the CPS Resource, Asset, and Service Maps tonight. This collection represents an exciting online interactive resource for our families, the community, our partners, and our staff. Really, this development began, as the superintendent mentioned, a number of months ago when she led a conversation, as she defined with the leadership, the director, the departments, around what really are the playing tricks on me, see if I can keep going. Around what really are the CPS must-haves that define CPS. So this is really a brainstorming session through a whole child lens, where we looked at those critical things, which really broke down into the people, partners, and services that we have and that we offer that can wrap around our students and give them the best outcomes possible. So at the conclusion of that brainstorming and creating these lists, it begged the inevitable question, right, is how do we make the availability of all of this more visible to our customers, right? So if you want to click on that link for me, Rob, or go to the next page, you'll see this is our landing page on the website. That is live tonight. So this is immediately live and available right now. So on this page, you'll see the header, of course, along with a description of what we're going to be looking at and talking about for the rest of the presentation around the maps. You want to flip back for me for just a second? And to the next slide. So as we went through these lists, we broke it down into 4 categories. So really what those represent is 4 individual maps. You'll see what I mean by interactive here in just a moment when we look at them. And we could really go through each of these buckets and say, okay, under the partner, locations, and services, here are the things you'll see. But I think it's a lot more impactful. How about we just go and look at it? We'll flip over to the first one. So just to orient us a little bit as Rob brings up the map, first of all, these are built on the Google platform, so it's very similar to what you've experienced, that familiarity and that usability of a Google Maps experience. You'll see by default, when you go to any of the maps collectively, you'll see that it opens by default to the Cincinnati area, highlighting the Cincinnati Public Schools overall district boundary and our schools. If you would click on one of the schools for me. So here's part of that interaction. If you click on any of the icons showing, it will pull up and tell you the name or the label of what that icon is representing, as well as the address that you're looking for. So that starts at the base level with our schools. So let's take a look at one of the others. Let's click off the schools for a second. And these lists on the left are basically the layers to the map. So you can enable any of these that you would like. So let's say we're a parent and we want to look and see what are resources available that I can find for before school care? So click on before school care for me, and immediately you'll see we have the flags pull up. It'll tell you where all of the before school care offerings and services are at across our district. It also, if you click on one of those, it'll tell you who the provider is, as well as the address and what the service they're offering is. Go back. Now you can also, so we can uncheck, look at after school. Quite a few more offerings there. They are color-coded by showing who the providers are so that you can follow if there's multiple providers for one service. Let's take one more. Let's look at our athletic partners at rec centers. So all of these are in reference to our schools. That doesn't necessarily mean all the services are in our buildings, but they're the services around our buildings. So looking at the rec centers, if you want to click the schools, you can look to see multiple layers. So we can actually turn the schools on to see where they're at and then have the rec centers layered with that so that you can see where those services are in relation to our buildings. So that kind of breaks down. There's a couple more of these we can go through, but that's the partnership category. Then we have the CPS programs that really details the program focuses for each of our schools and offerings around there. Go to that one for just a second. So again, it'll load the CPS default view, and then you can start enabling what layers you would like to see. So you can see language programs, and you can see by the language, it'll break down where those are located at and what we have to offer. Let's look at the books and library availability. Again, overlapping not just the CPS resources in our buildings, but where all of those are at. So it includes the public library, where books are available through our Rosie Reader program, as well as just schools that have libraries where books are available, in the Queen City Book Bank. All right, let's go to the next one. So this, click back over to the other slide for just a second, is the CPS asset and data map. This one is less about where specific resources are, although there are a few. You can see on the list like the food distribution locations, which are really important, but it also just has some additional data about us. So if you wanted to go and look at the report card overall star rating of each of our schools, you can see we now have school year 23-24 and school year 24-25. So now if you want to flip back over to the map. Go down and let's turn on the 23-24 first. So we can see what each of those are for each of the schools. But with this one, you can also leave that one turned on, but go down and turn the 24-25 on. So basically by toggling on either one of these at the same time, you can flip back and forth to see what the changes were for each of those locations. It gives you a one-stop shop to be able to see that very visually. All right, and our final map, we can just go straight to that one, is around the safety and transportation offerings, protocols, and controls that are in place. So this takes a little bit different look again at our schools so that we can see what the particular equipment or services around transportation and safety are in reference to the buildings. So start at the top, and this one also has a little bit different functionality you can see built into it just from the interaction. If we take these in order and start enabling the layers, let's enable the safety flashing speed limit layer. That's a tongue twister. Take the school, yeah. So first we'll see this is where the flashing speed limit signs are. But now let's click the non-flashing. And you'll see that it changes so that you can kind of track what is available at each location. Let's go to the next one for the painted crosswalks. So again, building on each of those layers where you can see what was there before and what is there in addition to. The crosswalk signals. Let's add the speed bumps. So you get the idea. So you can add each of those layers and can see at each school what are the safety controls that are in place. Okay? And again, this is found live starting tonight on our CPS website off the Community Hub. So if you go to our community, you'll see the CPS asset resource asset and data maps that are available, or services maps that are available tonight. Any questions?
Board members, Board Member Craig.
So first, thank you. This is a tremendous thing that we are doing, and it is a tremendous thing that a lot of districts have not done, to put those assets in front of consumers and to make them easily attainable. So I want to say that, kind of up front here, because I think that's another aspect that we've had conversations with parents about trying to navigate, figuring out where schools are, in addition to also figuring out which school is right for their students and those type of things. But also the community partners and the other aspects of things that are going on around that community is a great way to, again, inform parents and inform the community of where they can be of assistance. I guess my only question is as we continue to look at more and more of the partnerships and opportunities to partner with some of our community organizations, some of them may not have as stagnant of a spot, right? So they may operate out of multiple places. And so have we given any thought about kind of that aspect of it? I think about for instance, places that will go meet students at different places, or maybe they're at the library on certain days of the week to provide a service or those type of things, where it's not so much a set location, how we might incorporate those into the map.
So we've had some of those conversations. One thing I would definitely say is this is a version 1. So this is, we wanted to get live, get our base levels down. By no means is this an exhaustive list of the resources, assets, and services that we have. But it was a critical starting point that we wanted to get available, within the time frame we had. So there's definitely a phase 2 or improvements to come 3, 4, and on as we look at deeper into more of the things that we could add just so that there's more awareness around. And we'll definitely consider that in terms of, mobile services. There are ways to do that in a mapping schema as well. We just have to see how it would apply best. But we definitely will consider that.
Great, thank you. Board Member Crossett.
Yeah, thank you again, to echo Brandon's comments. Very impressive maps and very useful and visual, and thank you for doing it. I'm assuming this is version 1, so for example, when you clicked on a school, all it had was the address. Maybe you could have the phone number and the grades that it serves, and maybe even the, what do you call that thing that outlines where the school territory is? What's that called?
The attendance boundary?
Yeah,
Or the corridor?
maybe it could even have that someday, so when a parent clicks on a school, they can know, do I live in that school's boundary, and can I call the building?
Those are absolutely things on
Sure.
the
I mean,
to visit for next
I
time.
suppose there's things like that you could do throughout all the maps, yeah. Thank you.
Board Member Weinberg.
I was just going to say thank you so much. As I'm kind of looking through the different options that we have here, I do like the interaction aspect of being able to see what the stars are for each of the schools, and then also being able to see before and after school care. I think this is going to be a great tool for a lot of families who want to compare and kind of try to see what's in their area as well. So thank you so much. And I look forward to digging a little deeper into it as well, and also being able to suggest any additions. So thank you.
Vice President Bolton.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. For board members, this is fantastic. I think it's really great for the community. Some things and not surprisingly, just as we've said, since this is version 1, this is so developed already. If this is version 1 or the beginning or the baseline, thinking to some of the conversations we've had with city council previously, the interest in where our extracurricular activities would be and what they would be by school, particularly at our high schools, but also into our feeder programs as well. Because I've heard a couple of times out on the campaign trail, been hearing people talk about this school or that school providing more care and more this, more that. And I think we need to make sure that we list our extracurricular where we can. I'd probably draw in as best you can, since you kind of invented the lines that show what the corridors are. That might be interesting. But, and to somebody that just mentioned it about the libraries, thinking of them as a partner to us might be something to continue to work for. And I didn't notice because you went so fast, which we appreciate, health centers, vision, dental, and medical centers that we have that are housed in our schools. Again, something that not everybody knows, but this is great. And you had the preschools, which I think is very important. I don't know if we would want to put the private providers regarding preschool, and maybe that is there, but it looked for sure it was ours. It was just ours. Might want to put in the private providers and where they're located as well. But I think this is great. I think that probably next year this is going to be something to take to OSBA to shame the other 606 school districts, because they don't have this. And this is great. And this, you know what, this is really not only a great compilation of your work and everybody's work, but seeing this, it's like a history lesson. I mean, these are things that didn't happen overnight. People made great efforts to make sure that they're there, like that partnership with the Recreation Commission, and how many recreation centers are so close to our buildings and what have you. So I'm very impressed, very pleased, and I would just make those couple of suggestions, or 3 suggestions, but I love it. I love it. It's better than the big wall I always keep talking about. We need to put on a big wall, everything we do at each building, but this is great. You've caught me into this other century that I've been avoiding for a long time. Thank you.
Board Member Matt.
Thank you for the presentation. I think this, as my colleagues have stated, is very helpful for parents, for partners, and for all of us within the district. My question is around, and I haven't had a chance to peruse it, but my question is around the school piece. Is there opportunity for maybe each school to maybe have like an impact report? Like, I'm thinking about instruction. So if this is a tool that we're utilizing to have our parents interface with this material, one, to recognize what assets are available in proximity to the school, but also what assets are at that school particularly. I was wondering if there's an opportunity to make sure that we capture that as like it could be a 1-page impact report of all of the highlights for that particular school. I recognize that, yes, they can go to the school's website, but again, this may be one way or method to, again, showcase the various strengths that each school has and what the programming looks like for that particular school. And then if there is a way to, again, continue to tie this into like that instructional piece. So just wondering if there's conversation or thoughts around that, because again, we want to make sure that our community is aware of the assets around the particular schools, but also within the schools specifically. Because again, I think this is an engagement piece. I think this could be an opportunity for really increasing enrollment, and so really utilizing this tool to the best of our ability. So just curious, has there been conversation around those areas that I asked about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been conversation, thought, and consideration to the opportunities. Again, from a version 1 to maybe 3, 4, or later, and some of those ideas that we're talking about. But I mean, this could definitely go down to a more granular level to where we start at the district and work down when you go to a school, that you then see the school in and of itself as a map with the services and those kind of things. I think that's definitely a developmental future that we would want to look into.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you for version 1, and I look forward to what's to come from this.
Well, I'm going to give my comments. I am always impressed with you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for the work that you do. This is great. I do have a couple of insights, not criticisms, insights.
I'll take them both.
So I am very interested, while I love it, I think it is wonderful, I'm interested in parent feedback. We have a wonderful group of parents right there that we can be asking about, maybe to collect some of their data. But I think we need to also ask the customer, what do they think about it? First of all, what do they need? And secondly, what do they think about what we've built? And then put those areas of interest in place, because I'm interested very much in website traffic. I'm not exactly sure if people are coming to our website in droves. So to put a wonderful tool there that is not going to be utilized would be a wonderful waste of the talents and treasures of your department. And so please get some parent feedback. I would also solicit staff feedback and student feedback. They are the people that are going to be using this. And while we built this and I love it, I just want to make sure that it's utilized. Segueing that into a mobile version, I think that may be more realistic than to drive people to our website. I know mobile sites, mobile apps and things cost money, but I don't know if we have the ability to kind of easily segue into a mobile version that would be a little bit more utilized. When I think of a mobile version and when I think of the engagement piece, I'm very interested in tying this into Metro's existing route information, so that if I do want to go to Carson, I know how to get there. If I live on the west side of town or on the east side of town, I think that the functionality should be broader based than just awareness, because this is an awareness piece to me more than an engagement piece. This is about sharing what we do rather than having people engage in it. But along the lines of engagement, I'd be very interested to see if we could add PTOs to this. What buildings have PTOs? What buildings have LSDMCs? Put a contact information there so that they can just click on it and link. Again, I don't see this as being something that people are going to look at and be like, wow, I'm just really, really going to keep engaging with this like a game, but more like this is where I'm going to go to get information. And I really don't want to have to call the help center to get the contact information. If I am already here and I'm looking at it, I want to get the whole gamut. I want to be able to email and text and all of that from here and figure out how to get there. So I'm very interested in the mobile version. Lastly, I will say for phase 2, I think this is a wonderful tool for those English-speaking families and students. Not so much for our ESL families and students and staff. So I think we need to, this is great, but is there a version where we are engaging our families of a different language, where their native language is not English? Again, I would very first, before I go and switch this into a different language, ask them what they need, because they'll be able to tell you what they're interested in far better than myself. But this is a great foundation. I'm really interested to see the parent, the staff, the student, and the community feedback. This is really more importantly for the community to know what we're doing. So we can brag on it for sure, but if we're gonna brag on it, we need to make it so that they don't really have to ask us for a question, for an answer. It's already there. So, and again, the extracurricular piece is what I was interested in when I suggested we put all this in one place. I'm thinking of a parent that maybe I just want to know if your school has Girl Scouts. Maybe I don't want to know all this, but that's what I'm thinking parents are going to want to use it for. But again, that's me as a grandparent. We got a group of parents right there that'll tell you what they would use this for, if they would use it, and what they might need in the tool. So I'm very interested in seeing in the near future Phase 2 and some engagement pieces that are missing at the moment, but I'm sure are coming. So thank you. Board members, any other questions, comments, concerns? Vice President Bolton.
At the very beginning, it was mentioned about what every school must have, which makes sense, like it's ground level. And I think really this helps us also think about what schools need more than that, or don't have what everybody else has. I mean, the equity, this is as much about equity as it is about equality among the schools. I think that's interesting. And if nothing else, and there's a lot else, but the idea of this would help the future planning. I mean, this impacts how we budget. We can see where there's deficit or where there's tremendous asset and make some decisions more and more like we've been talking about per school, per student. I think this is very important. Thank you.
Just if I could, one last thing.
Yeah.
Just greatly appreciative of the feedback, some fantastic points. Absolutely intend that we would want to solicit both you, the parents, community, and everything for feedback now that we have the platform, absolutely. The other thing I would just like to take a moment to say, when I say it was a privilege to be able to show this tonight, it truly was, because it was not just all of my work. As much as I appreciate some of the kudos, this was truly a collaborative effort of gathering all of this information. Was not Chief Gollyhoo, right? I mean, there was basically the entire district involved in this, so it was a very large collaborative effort. So definitely want to spread those kudos to everybody, and thank you for all the hard work.
Well, kudos to everybody that put this together, because we are really appreciative. And I know it's not just you, but everybody, thank you so much for all that you did. Board Member Craig.
Just want to point out one thing also is even what we have right now, if you look at the map of where our schools are located, you also see the history of how the district was built and is shaped and has been reshaped. And I think, we'll have more conversations around what our population and other trends look like in areas where schools are, what we've talked about for years, where schools are just, we need more of based on the population density and those type of things. But I think it is important for us to just acknowledge, even looking at our buildings right now and looking where we have in our district, we cover a very large area. And the extent of where you have to go to from one edge of the district to the other edge, and from the top of the district to the bottom of the district, is still a pretty substantial amount of space. And I think it's just worth always remembering when we talk about the resources that we do in our district, because, again, I think that's one of the unique things about our district in comparison to some of the others, even in some of the other urban districts in the state of Ohio, is the compactness of some of those districts, in which if you move one school over, you have two more right around the corner. And here we have some areas where you may have two around the corner, and others where it's the only school for a good little amount of space. And so I just think it's sometimes helpful for us to remember that the way we got here is not necessarily by planning it out based on the city map, as much as it is based on where populations tended to move at the time that we were doing investments in our facilities master plans and other things.
Great, thanks, Jeremy, I appreciate you. You and your team, appreciate it. Vice President Bolton, please present your topic under board matters.
Yes, and I'm going to need, this is very brief, but I'm going to need the assistance of our treasurer, who can remain where he is, but also general counsel. What it is that these are some questions that have arisen over the last couple of weeks out in the community. And I wanted to bring back some of these questions so that our treasurer and our general counsel could answer these, rather than me so inadequately answer these questions out in public. And so I'm just going to read some questions, and I'm going to ask either Mike or Dan to answer those questions, if it pleases the group. First, Mike, treasurer, would you kind of explain to the public and remind the board about the size, the history, and the length of the renewal that is going to be voted on in 2 weeks?
Certainly. So the renewal that's voted on in 2 weeks is a $48 million fixed sum levy. And it'll show on the ballot as an emergency levy. But what that means is it's a fixed sum. It generates $48 million every year from tax of revenue. It was first enacted in 2016 and was renewed for 5 years, was renewed in 2020 for an additional 5 years. The issue on the ballot this November is the renewal for a period of 10 years. Of that $48 million, there's kind of a split there, and that's the way this levy has always been discussed with the community. So out of the $48 million, $33 million is to be used for K-12 programs by CPS. The other $15 million is set aside for preschool, preschool expansion, I think. I would just say preschool at this point, and then that money is split again between Cincinnati Public Schools and Cincinnati Preschool Promise.
Thank you. And when you say fixed sum levy, could you explain that for the public?
Sure, there are two types of levies. There are fixed sum and fixed rate. The difference is a fixed sum levy will only ever bring back that amount of money. So when we say it's a $48 million fixed sum levy, that is the amount of tax revenue we'll receive, minus any delinquencies we don't get every year. A fixed rate levy can have the amount changed over time. That is not this. This levy is built specifically to bring in that amount of income every year.
And because of that, this renewal does not raise taxes.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. This is Mr. Hoyne from the community. Could you explain the wording on the ballot, which sounds kind of strange?
Sure. The ballot language is set by the Ohio Revised Code. It reads, shall a levy renewing an existing levy be imposed by Cincinnati School District for the purpose of providing for the emergency requirements of the school district in the sum of $48 million, and a levy of taxes to be made outside of the 10 mil limitation estimated by the county auditor to average 5.05 mils for each $1 of taxable value, which amounts to $177 for each $100,000 of the county auditor's appraised value for a period of 10 years, commencing in '26 and first due in calendar year '27. A couple of points there. One is the emergency requirements of the district is a determination made by the board, but it is one type of levy, an emergency levy, and it allows the district, as Treasurer Guston said, to raise a fixed sum of $48 million. The $48 million is then submitted to, or the board's intent to renew this levy was submitted to the county auditor, who determines, based on all the taxable value in the county, what millage is used to generate $48 million. And in this year, the auditor estimates that that would be 5 mils, 5.05 mils. So that's how that's generated. Also, I think it's worth pointing out that this renewal would extend this levy for 10 years instead of the 5 years that it was renewed in 2020 and the initial term of 5 years that was passed in 2016.
Thank you. And that came from people that have started voting already, who are familiar with the language, wanted explanation. And then can you explain why the district is closed on election day, basically, and also what the district can and cannot do regarding an election like this?
Sure. So there are 18 schools in the district that serve as polling places. They are the community location where the Board of Elections leases our buildings in order to conduct the elections. The Board of Elections is very appreciative of schools being closed on those days. There is a lot of traffic, obviously, in and out of the building. It's in order to take all those folks through our security procedures, it just has been a great benefit and blessing to have schools closed on that day. I'd say it's been at least 5 or 6 years that the calendar committee has chosen to close schools on election day. The Board of Elections would love to have the spring election day also as a school day when schools are closed, but I will say there are less people in the building generally in spring elections, and so that's not been quite as problematic. In terms of what the district can and cannot do, it may not use its property or personnel to support or oppose a political candidate or issue. So the district cannot use its own dollars or property or personnel to go out and advocate for any political candidate or issue, including the school levy. This is something we train folks on and do principal trainings. We had a session about it in the all LSDMC meeting as well, so we would try to make sure that we're following the rules.
Thank you very much. The two of you have answered the questions far better than I have been doing out on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, do you have any need for clarity? All right. Next topic is our superintendent board guardrail discussion. So let me preface this with, board members have solicited ideas for board matters, inquiries, and updates. So this is a compilation of people's ideas. These are not Dr. Moffitt's ideas only. So there was a question around, and number B and C are kind of intertwined. What is posted on the website as guardrails and goals, when we talk about the strategic plan, there is 2027 data listed. And in the 2026 data hasn't been updated yet because we just finalized it. So there was further clarification needed around wanting to ensure that our strategic plan is going to be for 2026, 27, and we're gonna are we gonna use that number that's currently listed there? Or are we going to adjust that number and have it for 4 years? Because the board talked about 4 years as a timeline, but I couldn't succinctly answer that question. So that's why this is coming back up as wanting to have some clarification around the superintendent's goals being for the 2025, 2026 year, and having that updated. Additionally, having clarification around the strategic planning, and I believe this came from our committee of the whole. So do board members want to offer any clarification or offer any question around either the superintendent goal guardrail discussion or strategic plan timeline and clarification? The superintendent proposed at the committee of the whole, and we haven't had a chance to speak, but she proposed the desire to, there was an offer, or there was a discussion around kind of suspending guardrail discussions since we are no longer utilizing Council of Great City Schools formally, but there was also discussion around maintaining guardrails, but just monitoring them. There was discussion around not monitoring them, but allowing the staff to focus solely on strategic planning. So I brought this back up because we didn't decide on anything at the CAL, so we needed to talk about that. What are the thoughts of the entire board? Superintendent Murphy, would you like to clarify anything that I've said?
No, ma'am. We'll work at the pleasure of the board.
Okay, I'm gonna start over here, board member Mapp, and then we'll go to board member Weinberg.
Okay, yeah, so I, in fact, needed the clarification that you just outlined because trying to make sure that all of the different changes are working in sync. So we've just completed the superintendent evaluation process. Superintendent Murphy, you established new goals, which are for 25, 26, correct? And then, but all of those goals don't specifically align to our current goals and guardrails or strategic plan for the 4-year timeframe. So my question is the expectation to, while you have your goals, that's a separate entity while still honoring and working towards reaching the annual targets from our strategic plan up until June 2027, because while some of the annual targets have been met, not all of them have, been accomplished. And so I'm trying to get clarity on where we are with still honoring our current strategic plan and making sure that whatever targets were met, that we are maybe modifying the targets. Because I think for your superintendent goals, the only two that really align with the goals for the strategic plan is third grade reading and the Algebra 1 targets, correct?
Yes.
So I'm trying to identify, is it the recommendation from you to suspend our current strategic plan, adopt a new strategic plan with, I think the outline or the presentation that you have is for 26, 28. I'm just unsure about what the expectation is, given the fact that we have not honored all of the initial goals or targets from our strategic plan.
For me, in August, we presented the status of our goals and guardrails, and we asked the board what their pleasure was, because some of the goals had been met, and some of the goals, the timeline had or had not expired, so we wanted to enter into that conversation. The same is true with the guardrails. The reason I also wanted to enter into that conversation is because the entire plan expires 2027, so the thought was we would begin working on that in January of 2026. Throughout the conversation, there was the idea of begin to work on, as part of your 25, 26 goals, the next strategic plan, having it done by June 2026. So there was a combination of thought as we were having this collective conversation. Where I am right now is, my understanding is, goal 5 for me is working with the treasurer to create a at least 4-year strategic plan that would begin the fall of 2026. That's my current understanding.
Okay, so I guess this is just a question for the board. Thank you, Superintendent. What I'm hearing you say is that ultimately your decision-making and your thought processes around it is based off of the conversations that we've had collectively as a board. Okay, so I guess my question is to the board, trying to make sure that, to Superintendent Murphy's point, yes, there's planning for the new strategic plan, and I think that can begin to happen starting in January of 2026 to make sure that it is prepared and finalized to roll out by January of 2027. I don't think that I would necessarily be in favor of us starting the strategic plan, the new one, in, what did you say?
My understanding is the plan would start in the fall of 2026. So our team is starting, because we're starting, because I thought that was what we agreed upon as goal number 5.
Yeah. So again, and I thank you for that. I think my concern is we have not been able to fully identify areas of strength, areas of maybe improvement. I mean, we've only kind of worked this plan for 2 years, so I don't think it really allows us full depth of knowledge of how the plan is actually working. I think that in planning for the January 26, we'll have more data points, more opportunities to assess and evaluate how to reach those targets from the actual goal and not necessarily the annual targets that's embedded in that specific goal. And then be prepared to roll out the new strategic plan come January of 2027.
Board Member Lundy?
So I did have an understanding that was, I think, pretty similar to what the superintendent was sharing, but I do want to hear more and figure out the way to do the best that we can. I think there's a reason why, there are a couple reasons why I like what we approved on the 6th. of a must-have for the superintendent for this school year is the creation of a next strategic plan. The reason I like that timing is I want to try to link as close as we can the finances with the rest of the plan. And I like the idea that the superintendent and the treasurer would work closely together. The nice thing is it's October, we're talking about end of June. So where I think I agree for sure is there's some important reflection that should happen in coming up with a new strategic plan. What worked, what didn't work, what are lessons learned. My hope and expectation is that we have plenty of time to do all of those things. I think I have some desire, just transparently, to move towards a next thing because so much has changed. I think both within the board, within the administration, within the community. And I think it's going to take time to get a good strategic plan put together. So my understanding is quite in line with what the superintendent shared. And my hope would be that there's a way to do the kind of reflection that we need to do also. I think I'll just add one piece, and I'm open to pushback on any of this, which is that as we go through this school year 25, 26, and I mentioned this in the committee of the whole meeting, it does feel quite important to get meaningful, regular updates on the 5 goals that we approved in the October 6th meeting. There's also some content in the guardrails in particular that's really important, and I think like whether it's disparities in discipline or any number of the guardrails that are in there. The idea that we have a right-sized amount of attention and focus to that as we go through the year feels important. I'm using this word right-sized just because I don't exactly know what the right amount is. Because what I worry about is asking the administration to do so much in a given school year that they can't do any of it well. But that's what my understanding was. But again, I'm open to other ideas on any of this.
Feedback. Board Member Weinberg?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I know that I missed the Cal meeting, and I'm sad that I missed the discussion that you all had. The one thing that I just wanted to add in here is, although we're not with the council, I still think that we should personally stick with the guardrails, and I would be in favor for at least keeping those. I think that they are key. Of course, I know there is obviously a want for a new strategic plan and making sure that we're being very precise with that, and I am in favor of keeping the guardrails.
Board Member Craig?
And again, I think this conversation comes very timely because I think we have a lot of things that we are working through as we've changed the district a lot in the last year and a half. I do want to make sure that we are clear about one distinction, though. There is a strategic plan that was the prior superintendent's strategic plan that was what was built off of both the goals and guardrails that we created, but also other things that were a priority to the district at the time, that I think is more in alignment with what the superintendent is discussing as regards to building a strategic plan for this coming up years is a really realignment of what the district's focus and efforts and those type of things that, again, I think is more of the administrative end of it, not so much the vision of the board in that sense. I mean, I think we were a part of that process, but not necessarily the stakeholders for it, whereas the goals and guardrails were supposed to be our way of holding the superintendent accountable for the things that we identified as the most important things based on the conversations with the community. And again, I think I take Board Member Lindy's point that we've somewhat moved away from how we are checking ourselves on those things. And so I think it is not necessarily the most accurate for us to continue to kind of say that we are still living upon those. But I do think it is worth us, until we have the new strategic plan that might incorporate what is the most important parts or the most important things, that we not necessarily let go of the guardrails in that sense. The one thing I do worry about in us having this conversation and having the movement back towards just having a straight strategic plan as opposed to our established expectations and goals in that sense that the goals and guardrails are supposed to be for the superintendent is that our role in communicating with the public is very limited without having kind of a considered effort as the board going out and having conversations that are about what the board sets as the values of the district, or the values at least that have been communicated to us from the public about where the district should go. And I think that was in part the thing that we did gain from the goals and guardrails conversations was there were, certainly I know Board Member Bolden and I sat through a conversation where it went all over the rails about how people invested in the district and how much money came from where and that type of thing that we had to be able to answer to. And not to say that I think we should not do the strategic plan, I actually think we should. I just think there may be needs for the board to take a more direct approach of having our own board outreach to ensure that whatever comes out, whatever we review and proceed to approve is a reflection of the values that were communicated to us from the community. And I don't think it hurts for us to have maybe a couple opportunities to do some community forums or those type of things where we get a chance to hear from the public more than we've probably done in the last year or two. And I think that may get to Board Member Mapp's point in some ways of finding out what works and doesn't work, because if we don't talk to folks, we don't know what works and doesn't work, but it may be things that we have to figure out how we would accomplish those things in the same process as the strategic plan is developed. And while the superintendent does, and the administration does their own communication and outreach and engagement with the public on the things that would be in there. So I think there, in some ways, we created a two-way system when we did the goals and guardrails. And I'm wondering whether or not the board still wants to stay with that process where the board has a certain amount of values that we establish for our own direction to the superintendent, and where the superintendent has the administrative strategic plan that is built to determine where the district kind of moves towards. So I mean, I kind of just pose that out there to us as a board to kind of discuss or decide.
Thank you. Vice President Bolden?
Yes, great conversation, I think, and it's helping me clarify my thoughts. You know, I was never too excited about the whole Great City Schools approach to it, but I do think that the two work products, particularly that were important, were establishing a limited number of goals by which we measure our superintendent's success in the district. And then also the idea of stating our values as a board representing the community, if indeed, or at least the way we understand what the values of the community that we represent are. So my druthers would be that we have now moved to the 5 goals that we have agreed to with the superintendent, with her mutually, rather than the other goals. And I would suggest that if we need to have a discussion about all of the guardrails remaining, or if there's any that we feel are no longer of value, that could be a discussion. But I'm predisposed to keep virtually all the guardrails, but again, I'm open to discussion. I do know that looking back at documents, it has been said that the current strategic plan could be finished as early as the spring of '26 or the summer of '27. That was always kind of a range that could happen. And I do believe that for financial reasons and for all the reorganization that's occurred in the district, I do think that we probably want to live by the idea of what we voted on and have a strategic plan that is put together and is part of the next fiscal year '27 and '28 and '29 and '30. I think we are in deep economic duress and tension, and I think that our strategic plan will need to reflect that. So I'd like to move to the 5 goals. I'd like to keep all the guardrails unless our discussion proves different. I think we can put the strategic plan together and have it impact the next 3 fiscal years or 4 fiscal years, as well as the next 3 or 4 school years. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Crossett.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that the administration has already started on strategic planning. I think that's important. I think that to echo Board Member Weinberg's point, I think if the administration has the bandwidth, I think for this school year to continue to monitor and report on the goals and guardrails would be fine, because I think those can go a long way towards informing what our strategic plan is going to be going forward. I also think that trying to have a strategic plan aligned with our fiscal years is going to be really important. I believe that we can have, if we're starting now, we can have a strategic plan ready for the next school year and be in line with our fiscal years. So I would be in favor of continuing to at least look at the goals and guardrails as to help us inform a strategic plan. There may be some very good things in this that we will want to continue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go, and then we can, if anyone wants to add to this, then they can. As I shared with my colleagues at the CAL, I am not a proponent of getting rid of guardrails. I think while we don't formally pay for the Council of Greater City Schools, the work that we spent almost a year doing is invaluable. And I think that it needs to be presented to the public. Not only does it hold the administration accountable, but it also tells the public where we are in full transparency around values that we spent a significant amount of time learning from them that they valued. So I think the bandwidth of the administration is already established, so I'm not interested in shortening that. I do feel for our staff, though, because they are doing a lot with less. And so I appreciate everything that everyone is doing. But I think that the awareness to the community is significant, and I just believe we need to publicly place our values out there and then hold, the community needs to hold us accountable to that. Also, once upon a time, there was a time when the community was involved in the strategic plan. And we talk about the administration doing their strategic plan, and I think that's great. I think that bulk of work should be done by the administration and the treasurer's office. But I really will invite you to schedule expeditiously some community involvement sessions where you authentically and transparently hear from the community around the strategic plan. The theme that I'm going for here that I don't see enough of, and I'd like to, is engagement with the community. I think that it should be organic. If it's not organic, then the board should hold that as a preserved value, that it become organic, because the community should be in the strategic plan. The community should be monitoring the goals and guardrails. So I'm never going to be a fan of cutting that out simply because it makes life easier on some level, minimally. Additionally, I think that I think it's aggressive to have a strategic plan that we can get established in a very short period of time ahead of our expectations. But I would almost caution that we're planning for 4 years. And initially, I liked the idea of 4 years because I thought that was the typical lifespan of a high school student. You come in ninth grade, you get out in 12th grade, and that makes sense. But with the changes that are rapidly happening at the state level and the federal level, I am more prone for us to have a short timeline so that if we need to pivot, we can pivot quickly. We already have engagement with the community, so if we need to ask the community to become involved with us legislatively, it is just filling in blanks. It's not creating a wheel. We need to have a shorter window with realistic, tangible, small goals that are already established to the community. So I'm not for a 4-year timeline for a strategic plan. Again, I was for that because it made sense, but we're talking about changes that we learned in January, February that are now going to be implemented within this 2025 year. And so I just would caution us to be in our effort to think long-term. And I know strategic plans are not 1 year, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that there is a huge weight upon us that may cause us to pivot quickly, which would force our staff to have to really make large adjustments rather than to make them incrementally. So my heart feels for the administration and having to present guardrails monthly, but I think that that's how we remain true to the community and letting them know regularly where we are so that they can hold us accountable. We can go back around. Did anyone else have anything to add? Board Member Mapp, were you on?
Yes.
Okay.
So, to Board Member Lindy and Board Member Craig's point, I do appreciate the alignment with the budget or the financial plan, because we do recognize that how we budget our dollars, that also expresses our values. What we're spending our money on as a district is, whether advertently or inadvertently, communicating what our values are. So I agree with making sure that the strategic plan aligns with that. But to the point that I raised before is that I am concerned that we've established a strategic plan that the community, that the district has been invested in supporting, and we have not, again, met, and correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I am wrong and maybe I am missing something. We have not met the actual goal target or surpassed the goal, the major goal target. What we have done, if I am interpreting this correctly, we may have surpassed annual targets with the expectation of continuously working towards that final target in the 2027 year. So I think that it is helpful for us to continue to monitor that data. I think the goals that the superintendent have shared with us, especially is the ones that pertain to third grade reading and Algebra 1, if we want to incorporate those or update those targets on the website, I think that would be helpful, and maybe then make adjustments to the 2027 one if we need to. But given the fact that we have not reached or surpassed the overall target area and the main goal, I think is really negligent of us to continue to make changes in our district. As you all have talked about, there's been significant changes in the district, and I think that we need to make sure that we have some foundational level to make sure that there's stability in what we are doing. We would never be able to evaluate, again, what is working, what is not working, if we don't have something that's going to hold us all accountable to the work. And so I just think that we need to make sure that we're being responsible in how we are holding the superintendent accountable to this work as well. So again, I'm in agreement with the strategic plan and the financial plan aligning. That date is for September of 2026, correct? For the financial plan? June, okay. Okay, so, and this may be a question for Treasurer Augustin. So if we pass the budget in June, that would be for the 26-27 year though, correct? So I guess maybe I'm missing why we couldn't implement that plan in, January of 26-27?
Yeah, I think the discussion was that the 26-27 budget would then be year one of the strategic plan. And so kind of to echo what you said, where you spend the money, kind of shows, what you value. And so the importance was, we only approve a budget every year. And so having the budget starting in June aligned to the strategic plan, so that even the spending that we would do in July and August, ramp up the school, would be targeted towards that new strategic plan. And so we wouldn't come in mid-year and say, okay, now we need to make changes. Well, it's much easier to change things before the year starts in the middle of the year. I think we found that over the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, I'm just having challenges with recognizing that this strategic plan was pretty much only for 2 years. which the superintendent was only really accountable for maybe 1.5 of those years. And so I am apprehensive about us continuing to change yet another thing without having accountability around it. And so that is my concern.
Board Member Lundy?
I think I agree with big pieces, if not everything, of what you shared, particularly on the importance of accountability and what's at risk when you change over and over and over and over again, because there's no sustained focus, no sustained attention, and no accountability for anything. So I am with you 100% on that. It's one of the reasons for the last several months I've been banging this drum over and over again about the importance of the evaluation policy. And I just am grateful for everybody who's, whether that's policy committee last year or the board this year, I do think that's taken some big steps forward, and I appreciate it. There is no but coming at the end of all this. I think the thing that is also true is, at least in my experience, it is easier to own something if you feel like you had a role in creating it. And all of this was created with a previous administration and a different board. And so my hypothesis is we're actually going to be better at sustaining focus and having accountability if there's a sense of ownership from this administration for what the goals are, what the long-term plan is. My worry in trying to sustain accountability and focus on something that is a carryover, and I think a good carryover from the previous administration, is that there's that absence of ownership piece from the superintendent. And that's not I voted for every single one of these goals. We have too many guardrails. I didn't vote for all the guardrails. I think we should have only had 5 instead of 6. Anybody who was here will remember that meeting. I was outvoted. But I stand by the things I voted for. It's just a question of what's going to get us the best ownership from the current administration. And that's like, other than that, I agree with every single thing you said.
I saw Board Member Crossett.
Yep. I think to echo board members Mapp's concerns about accountability, I think it's really important to have the financial year and the review year be the same. Because if you have them separate, it's much harder to hold the superintendent accountable if mid-year the goals change or the dollars change. So I really think it's critical that they be in sync. And the other thing that I think we might want to consider that I've had experience with in the past, and maybe we've done this, but you could have a 3-year or 4-year strategic plan, but I think evaluating it every year as you go along to tweak it just a little bit based on what happened in the year before is going to be really important. It doesn't have to be a static strategic plan that we're stuck with. It can live based on the changes that we have. I hope we'll be open to that. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Vice President Bolton.
Yeah, thank you. I think it would be useful to Member Mapp's position. It would be useful for some period in work product to reflect on what was accomplished or not yet accomplished in the existing strategic plan. I think that would be helpful to everyone. And I think we need that reflective time. I do need some clarification, though, about the goals. My understanding is that the new goals would be the 5 that we have with the superintendent arrived at. So I would suggest a reflection by the administration and by the board who's interested in kind of assessing, and I know we've done it before, assessing how much of the strategic plan was accomplished or not. I think that can inform the next strategic plan to a certain extent and clarify the goals. I do think that we keep some of the consistency and the accountability if we maintain the values that are expressed in the guardrails. If those carry forward, I think that helps me. Financially, the state now is not doing 5 years. The state now is doing a 3-year forecast. So that would also lend itself to us thinking in terms of not the 5 or the 4 to the president's position, but a 3-year. And yeah, you should be annually evaluating the strategic plan where you are and being reflective about it. I don't have a lot of ownership of the current strategic plan, largely because the previous strategic plan was really generated by the community. This one that we've been living under, for good reason, was very much a strategic plan based on governance and a relationship between the superintendent and the board. And it was needed for that. But I think it is better to return to our traditional values of having the community have a bigger say in it. So I'm looking at keeping the guardrails or whatever ones we think we should, changing the goals, having maybe a 3-year strategic plan that we work on, and maybe it'll be shorter or longer, but it would be better if it is a confluence with the 3-year forecast and having a community-driven strategic plan. And then my other issue is over these next 3 years, we will be going to the public in significant effort regarding dollars and monies. And I think whatever we're doing has to have a time frame that makes sense with what the requests are going to be that we're going to be making for new money in these next few years. And I can't remember the glorious year that we will have paid off the $1.7 billion facilities master plan, but it is on the horizon.
2030.
2030. And that has to be some kind of bookend for us, or some kind of goal, some kind of target as we look at these coming years, as we are now getting ready to do fiscal year 27. This is all kind of happening in a very fortuitous way, I think. So that's what I would like to be thinking about, but it's good, important to do this, very important. Thanks.
I'm just going to add before I go to Board Member Lindy, you bring up that in the next few years, we're going to be asking the community for money. And I would suggest that you've engaged them prior to asking. And make sure, it's just a forewarning to the administration and the treasurer, that people don't like, just as Board Member Lindy shared, people don't typically respond well when they don't have ownership. It is the exact same with regard to a strategic plan. And so keep that in mind when you are designing that. Board Member Lindy.
This is on the same point around community involvement. I can't tell if there's a disagreement between what my colleagues are saying and what I'm about to say, or if there's actually no disagreement. If we go back a couple of board meetings, the administration shared a series of bullets around the plan for creating the strategic plan. And my first piece of feedback was it has to start with listening. So to this point, I do believe deeply in the importance of engaging community here and elsewhere. I also think this is not instead of, this is in addition to, there's a really important role for expertise. We pay a lot of money to salaries for people across our entire district. I'm including teachers and principals and central office administrators. And I think that where I've sometimes seen some strategic planning processes go astray is that the community engagement is not just about what are the things the community really wants most from its school system and where do we have the most work to do, but also around what are the specific strategies for how we get there. I'm not saying you never ask for that. That's not at all what I'm saying. I think you absolutely ask for that. But I think there has to be some role for the superintendent, for her team, to look at all of this information that we're receiving and to say, we're not going to be able to do everything, but here are the set of big strategic moves we think will most advance the values that we're hearing from the community. And I say that just because I think that it's not so much a yes or no around community involvement, but a where and how. And I'm one board member. I understand I'm often outvoted and maybe outvoted on this one. But this is from my perspective where there is a vital role for community involvement and also a risk that we abdicate our responsibility to have an opinion about what will drive the largest outcomes, and that we lead on that. And my hope is that we can do both.
Thank you. Board Member Craig.
So I don't want to get ahead of what is another part of our agenda today, because I think the actual very next item is the schedule on the strategic planning. But I think that is a little bit into one of the things I do think, whatever we decide to do as a board, I think we have an obligation to hold ourselves accountable in some ways to whatever the results that come from that might be. And I think this may get a little bit into where I completely understand it and actually support in a lot of ways the desire to make sure that we are making determinations based on evidence and based on facts, right? Based on things that we've gotten information on, that we're able to guide, engage as to how successful those things have been. And I do think that's one of the things for at least the last couple of years, we've made so many changes in this district where it does not feel like we have given time for us to even be able to ascertain whether or not the change has worked, hasn't worked, has grown, hasn't grown the district, has been successful. Some of those things were necessary changes, right? Some of those things were things we had to do. And some of those things are things that we have chosen to do as a board, given direction, and as the administration undertaking the effort. What I think might be hopeful for me, and then again, I think we all have things that'll be helpful for each of us, but as we talk through strategic planning, I think there is a role for the board to decide what is our purpose in that strategic plan process. And I think that is, in some ways, you do want the strategic plan to be created outside of the board, right? Because you don't want any one board member to have like an outside influence on the conversation. You want it to be driven based on the folks who are actually in the trenches, who actually know what's happening each day and that kind of deal. And the parents and the students who are all involved in that process. I think President Moffitt raised a great point of the community part to building the strategic plan. And so again, I think it's the next thing on our agenda, so we'll go through the schedule. But I think to a certain extent, to honor the things that we said when we went through the governance coaching and honor some of the principles of what we said, I do think there is an obligation for us, regardless of what we even move to still go back and do the thoughtful look into how things have operated and how some of what we've done over the last couple of years and some of the things we'll have to do over the next couple of years, to how those things either worked, didn't work, the lessons we learned from them, the things that we continue to keep growing from. Because while I don't necessarily say that we should stop process to do that we can do them somewhat simultaneously, maybe not as efficiently or effectively that way. I think we are unfortunately left in this position because we do have some things that are going to be coming down the pipeline, even whether it's next year or the year after, that are some huge potential budgetary issues that will limit our ability to do any of the things that we want to do in our strategic plan, to be quite honest, outside of the bare basics, the way that our state seems to want to fund public education. And what I think what would be helpful as we talk through the next section of our agenda is also recognizing, leaving space for both the idea of the board's role in that, creating the vision, creating the message that is what is our district's purpose, but also the nimbleness to be able to explain to the public when we have to make changes from where we have set as a path. And I think that is where we have not done the best over these last couple of years, is that when we make changes, we make them and then expect folks to just adjust. And I think that's, maybe to Board Member Mapp's point, I think in a lot of ways, when we do that, and then we say, okay, here's now a new thing we're gonna do, and you just gotta adjust, at some point, folks can no longer adjust. And that's what I will say, that's what I somewhat worry about. I'm waiting to hear back from them, waiting to hear the plan and all those other parts to it, but I think there is some level of the plan that has to recognize that if we have to make substantial changes to the district, it's going to have a big effect both on the psyche and how some of our students have experienced the district and how some of our students will continue to experience the district, but it will also have a effect on how people trust what we say we're going to do, we'll do. And I think that is one area where I do think we can address some of that. That's why I think like the board's hearing from the people and we're able to hear some of those messages. We're able to provide some of that thought into what our vision of what it is will be. But I think that I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the plan, again, up next, and how the board's role in that ultimately will look like, and how the community's role will ultimately look like, but also how we will stay committed to whatever we promise to do. Because again, I think that's where I'm a little bit more worried about some of the stuff we've been doing and some of the ways we're tracking it and communicating it, is that I don't know that we, as a board, have really held ourselves accountable to when we've said we're going to do something and then we change up and do something different.
Well, having said that, that's why I kind of paused when I looked at you like, well, let's go into the next presentation so that we can be talking about something that we've presented on. So Superintendent Murphy, the next item was the strategic plan, timeline, and clarification. Can you present that for us?
Yes, ma'am. So Rob, on the very next slide, I think the board knows that Mike and I had an opportunity to have a conversation just before your retreat. And we just talked about a skeletal framework that we shared with you on that Saturday in terms of how long, what would the approach be, the direction that we received from you about making sure that our work is aligned. And so after that, we were able to get together and pulled in Mr. Burkhart, in particular because of procurement questions and needs. But we hope that you can see on this timeline that we are hearing you as it relates to the need to engage with the community, to have community engagement. The type of strategic planning I'm used to doing, I did participate on the previous strategic plan committee where there was deep community engagement and involvement and input. And so that's what we're looking forward to do. And you can see the entire outline, which involves getting information from our staff, from our teachers, from our administrators, as well as the members of our LSDMCs and the broader community as a whole, with the goal of being able to deliver to you by the end of June, if that is still the direction, a strategic plan for the next, we at one point said 4 years, we can adjust that to 3, whatever you think is the best to do. I do understand aligning it with the treasurer. There is now a 3-year picture, but then we also talked about the life cycle of a high school student being 4 years. So we are ready to do whatever the pleasure is of the board. There are additional, I didn't know if you wanted me to stop there or
No,
keep going.
did you
So,
wanna pause?
Rob, if you go forward, probably a couple of slides. And then I'll have Mr. Burkhart come to talk about the bid process.
Thank you. So as we put together the timeline, the proposed timeline, we looked at where we wanted to start from and where we wanted to end, and basically reverse engineered everything that we wanted to have happen from the starting point to the ending point. And so as you'll see, we start October, November, start the bid process, looking and sending out the bid, evaluating the proposals, selecting the vendor, and then from then on, we go to vendor onboarding and having those discussions with the vendor on what our expectations are moving forward. Rob, if you want to go to the next slide. So we issue the bid, we look at the proposal review, and we select the vendors. Next slide, Rob. That was October, November. In December, we start to make it a formal announcement of who we selected. We start to onboard and align those sessions with the selected vendor, and then we start planning. So that's teacher, principal, and parent insights. As we look at the next slide, we'll go into getting everyone's voice. To Dr. Moffitt's concern is having a student voice, educator input, parent engagement, and leadership feedback. So we're trying to make sure that we get multiple sessions of all of those inputs over the next couple of months. So that's over January and February. If we go to the next slide, we'll see an SLT workshop. So the senior leadership aligns on all the strategic directions, as well as LSDMCs also integrating that with their budget planning and what the schoolhouse looks like. As we look at March, we have some strategy retreats. So each department looks and develops their focused plans. Also, performance goals, strategies, and metrics are defined. So it takes us one step further into the process. Now, as we're into each one of these into March and April and May, it doesn't mean that we have stopped engaging with those groups. It just means that as we look at each one of these benchmarks in each one of those months, we want to specifically put these in, but we always want to look back at, do we need to engage students more as we develop the performance goals, strategies, and metrics, or as the department develops their plans underneath this strategic plan, do we have to go back and talk to adults or families or communities about that work? So I don't want to say that this is siloed. This is all working together in tandem. As we go into March through May, we're doing the budget review, so that budgeting process will continue to happen all the way up until May. Obviously, having, again, as we get deeper and deeper into solidifying the plan, having community feedback sessions on kind of our first inklings on what this is actually going to look like as a finished product. And then also reaching out to our vendors and making sure that what we want to have done is also within some of our vendors and making sure that they can deliver on exactly what we want to have happen through that process. Obviously, through June, the board will approve the final budget, which will hopefully finalize that part of the plan as well. We will have our roadmap finalized, and then individual objectives aligned to that strategy will happen as well, June and beyond. As we finalize in July, again, this isn't we're done in July. This is we hope to have a final draft that we can start executing. This is a living, breathing document. So as we look at our action plans and looking at continuous improvement and monitoring our process, we also want the plan to be able to be fluid throughout those months, all the way up through 2028, or as the board was discussing earlier, even longer. So with that, we put together some key factors of success. So having stakeholder engagement, having it be a transparent process. Those are two things that prior to putting the slide together and then hearing that reaffirms that these are the things that the board is actively looking at and making sure that the administration is looking at. Having data-driven decisions, clear accountability, and adaptive planning. That adaptive planning goes to, as we look at multiple years of that plan, if something on our landscape changes, being able to adapt that plan so it's not just a static piece of paper or static plan that we can't adjust if things adjust either at the federal, state, or local level. And that is it.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions, comments, concerns? Board member Craig.
So 2 questions, and I'll try to be quick about these. The first one is, and I think this is maybe to the point that Dr. Moffitt raised earlier, but I think the point that we've done a little bit of is adding, is it possible or not possible, but is there a component of this that will actually look at specifically what community feedback outside of just LSCMC community members? I think that's another aspect as we're expanding outreach to some of these folks. It might be good to just bring them in on the strategic plan as well, because it also gives them a space to figure out how they can help in the capacity, and as well as what are the things that the district needs. So I think that would be one, is as to whether or not we're going to provide that. And then I think the second question is just, kind of the cadence of check-ins with the board to give updates on where things are moving and kind of what are those expectations around that?
Yeah, so in relation to the community feedback, I think we purposely put together some different ways to nuance that feedback. One was you might be asking a parent upfront in the process. You might be asking a teacher upfront in the process. You might be asking an administrator upfront in the process, but you're also through the process also asking the community. So that people are wearing multiple hats, have multiple places in which to insert. Early on, it might be a parent or a teacher, but later on it might be as a community member. So I think we've intentionally called those out differently throughout the plan so that we could get maybe the same person who has a different view or a different hat on for that different experience.
And then the second part was the cadence of bringing updates to the board.
Thank you.
I don't know, Mr. Craig, if we'll have much to report on before January, because right now we're doing the technical pieces of putting it together, getting someone to work with us on the design. So if that's acceptable.
Thank you. I'm going to just take a point of privilege and go as well. I think I'm concerned about a 3-year contract. Again, I don't know if, I just am concerned about our budget. And so tying us to a 3-year contract concerns me. And I don't know if that's considered in my mind, if it's standard operating procedure or if it's just, we need to be cognizant of a 1-year contract. I don't know. I don't know what the norm is, but I'm just telling you, I'm worried about that. I'm also worried about, and I understand you all are in the beginning stages, but community feedback should include board members because we report to the community. So perhaps what you could do right now is include board members in the questions that you're posing. What you could do right now is send all of those things, not necessarily for approval, but for awareness. Again, you need to include, it's not the administration show, it's really about engaging the community. And I understand doing it different ways and your analogy for different hats, but there's a way to do that that includes board members who report to the community. So that needs to be forethought. And it also should be a regular reporting, again, maybe at the CAL with the goals and guardrails, talk about the strategic plan and those things as well. But again, for me, a 3-year commitment is just, I don't want to tell you who to hire, but I definitely think that needs to be stated, that we're talking about a contract, a long-term contract, and our monies are questionable. So that's just my personal opinion. Any other board member feedback? I'm going to go to Board Member Lindy and then Vice President Bolton.
Thank you. It's a great update, and I really appreciate it. Could we go to the very first slide you shared that had the full picture on it, or timeline? Great, thank you. I think there, on the bid piece, I think there are pros and cons to getting outside help on something like this. I hear the resource constraint point for sure. I also think that there is power in having a third party for us as a board and for the administration, because they can play a role in reflecting back certain pros and cons and choices in a way that is hard to do as a stakeholder in the system itself. So I see both sides of that. I think when you had shared, Superintendent, the original version of this, there were 3 points that I had raised, and I think I see some of them addressed. I just wanted to track the 3 of them for a second. The first thing I said was start with listening. And so I do see the stakeholder insight sessions here really clearly. Am I following that correctly? We're front-loading this with listening to the community. It's great. I think the second one was that it be linked to the finances. I think that's also really clear throughout all of this. So I think those 2 things feel like they get a big check mark from my perspective. The third one was once we have pulled out the issues that are of highest priority to the community, whatever we choose to do in terms of strategy, I think should learn from who is best at this in the country. And the this there is so let's say that the priority from the community listening is career readiness outside of college. I'm making this up, but let's say that that is a priority. Then I think wherever we're coming up with what are our big ideas for how we're going to improve that, we're not coming up with things from nothing. We're learning from, well, which districts have made the biggest strides on college and career readiness around the country? What did they do? And how can we apply those lessons for students and families here in Cincinnati? That was the last piece. I just wanted to see where that came through in this process. That was my last question.
I do see that work being done as part of the strategy workshops, starting in about February or so, after we get the insight from all of the stakeholders.
And would that be a part that whatever the vendor is helping to facilitate?
Yes.
That sounds like a very reasonable approach. It sounds great from my perspective. I think my suggestion would be, if that's what we're going to ask the firm to do in that stage, that part of the RFP that goes out is asking them for examples of times when they have led that kind of work in the past, specifically pulling strategies from where there have been the strongest results in other communities. But thank you. I think that this really does address the things that were top of mind for me, and I appreciate it.
Vice President Bolton.
Yeah, I understand the importance of having a facilitator through the process, especially facilitating community engagement, particularly, which requires I think the greatest amount of skills and needs to be totally open and unbiased. I have no interest in having a 3-year contract with anybody after this thing gets done. When it's created, it falls to you all to implement and us to oversee. I don't want to establish some long-term relationship with another third party, but we do need somebody to facilitate and guide us through this process, especially considering it's rather short period of time to develop a strategic plan. So that's one thing. The couple of strategic plans ago, we actually put out a call to the community if they were interested in participating in the strategic plan. And it took 2 directions, if I recall. And one was that with all the people that said we want to participate, we actually selected some and explained why the selections were done. But then you had also a continuing plenary group that had expressed interest in the beginning and then was added on as we went, so that the community was very participatory, as were the major partners and organizations and what have you. I think that opening it up is good for the community to not just about the LSDMCs and the people that are already full participants, but people that might have some wider perspective. I think it can be done in these months if we're starting now and we give a strong direction as to what it is instead of any kind of confused approach. The other piece I would say on the strategic plan is that we already, and I said this sort of at the retreat, and I think Member Lindy was right in correcting me on something, where I said it's actually, we're in a position right now to move more quickly than we normally would, largely because of what we've lived through for the last 2 years. Cutting and adding and reorganizing and what have you. And we also now have, I think, uppermost a high profile of our governance regarding our direct reports. And we also know that the LSDMC situation and other internal activation at the school level has been happening. So I think we can get it done. I'm not interested in a long-term relationship. Happy to have us hire some sort of facilitator. I'm excited about being able to do this and actually having a confluence of the budget and the strategic plan. We tried that for 1 year, and at that time, we spent so much money the first year of the strategic plan that we had to regroup. So we have to be very careful about front-loading any money early on in the plan because we don't have that money. Then we did. Now we don't, but we paid for that for the next 3 years after that. Thank you.
Board Member Crossan?
Yep. I think the community involvement that Eve was talking about, the broader community, is going to be important. I especially think we ought to take a look at, try to dovetail our plan, see if we can sync it up a little bit with like Greater Cincinnati Foundation, Chamber of Commerce, United Way, some of those organizations that are big, helpful partners. If we can be sure to link into ways that they can augment us would be good.
Board Member Mapp?
Yes, so Chief Burkhardt and Superintendent Murphy, so I do like both perspectives that my colleagues have shared about having a third party to make sure that there's objectivity and fairness in the process, but also recognizing that financially we are not in a good space. So I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts around being able to balance both? Because I also am not interested in a long-term financial agreement, but wanting to, again, make sure that there's that level of transparency and objectivity in the process, because engagement has been a significant challenge for us. I want to make sure that we are able to hear our voices to support the strategic planning process.
We understand the financial picture for certain. So we are really just looking at someone to help us facilitate, bring all the pertinent people together to have the conversations and be a third party so that it doesn't appear biased or leading. And we understand that we believe we can do that just with this initial creation of the plan, and then we will do the rest of the work.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Craig?
I actually just, and again, it's a little bit goes into when we were talking about aligning the strategic plan with also our budget development. And so this is probably more towards Treasurer Guston than to the superintendent and Chief Burkhardt. But the need to also think through, as we talked about the ideas of like revenue generators or potential things that we would need to change within a district as our operations go forward. I guess I'm wondering, to Board Member Lindy's point about like the best ideas, both can go towards the instructional side, but also are we thinking about like what's in the best course of action, those budgetary things, and are those conversations that would be occurring as we're developing the budget in alignment with the development of the strategic plan?
The short answer is yes. I think as we've recognized here, there's potential to have less money significantly. There's not new money coming in the near future. And so in order to kind of build space to do new instructional things, we have to get more efficient on the operational side. We have to look at, like you said, like new revenue ideas, that aren't your traditional, funding through tax dollars and those sort of things. So I think that's a key part of the plan is how we make it not just an instructional plan, but a strategic plan that crosses the entire organization.
And I think that taps into what was the presentation that was done at the retreat, where we had Vice President Bolden loved about the one colorful slide that had the different plans that we all have for the district that can be looped into one. I think the concept of that also with looking at the budgetary aspect, as you're having the conversations with the parents, as you're having the conversations maybe to a different degree with the students around budget, but and they understand, but we don't want to get too far into the weeds for them. But for the staff or, administrations and at the different schools and stuff. I think it is helpful to, in some ways, map out the choices more so than what is your priority. And I say that in part because I think people are going to come in with their thing that they absolutely want, and it sounds great, and every one of them will sound great, and we can't fund all of them. Right? And so then, as we come up with a strategic plan, I think it is helpful to maybe provide some, at least parameters to the discussions. And I think that's through however you decide to do those conversations. But I've seen focus groups work better when they have a topic that they can then give some thoughts around as opposed to free form. And that's the only thing I would worry about, is that we're going to have a lot of schools and a lot of parents who have really specific things they want that we absolutely, probably in an ideal world, would do, but may not have it match up to our budgetary plan as well. So I think it's maybe like it's a good way to guide some of that, is that not start with the if we had infinite dollars, what would we do conversation that we typically do when we go out and talk to folks.
Great. I'll just add my last 2 cents is I understand the need for having to hire an outside person. I've echoed the sentiments of my colleagues here. I would like to also find an opportunity to utilize some of our own in-house for facilitation, and that would be a very appropriate space to me to provide a bonus or a stipend for our own people to do this work, so that we're not outsourcing. I'd love for us to look at more ways to be able to utilize the expertise that our staff have. Maybe not for the initial getting us through the foundation, but this to me seems like a space where we could incentivize our own people with an appropriate stipend rather than how we've been using them on some instances. Any other questions, comments? All right. Superintendent Murphy, anything else from you? Thank you, Mr. Burkhart. Well, we are chugging along, board members. We always get to the part where it's heavy. We almost need to stretch. Board Member Lundy.
Yeah, but just before moving on, I wanted to make sure we got the superintendent clarity on the issues that were raised before, just about goals, guardrails, strategic planning, timeline. Do you feel like you have clarity? And if so, could you just share it back with us to make sure we don't wind up making your life difficult later on?
I am clear on my 5 goals. May need some adjustment on the way the strategic plan goal is written, as it says 4 years right now, and maybe I'm hearing 3 years, so clarity there. I am clear that we will continue to report out in Cal on the current guardrails. And I believe I am clear on moving forward with planning the new strategic plan for fall of 2026 and beyond. That's my understanding.
No objections here. Thank you.
Sounds like Board Member Lindy needed the clarification. Sounds like I understood it the way you did.
So Dr. Moffitt, so the current goals.
Have already been approved. We already approved those 5 goals.
So 5 goals, continue to report during Student Achievement Cal on the current guardrails, and begin to work with the treasurer, continue the work with the treasurer on the new strategic plan, 3 years?
I'm hearing 3. What my colleagues, Board Member Craig?
I think there was a thought process around, and there was a reasoning behind the 4-year, and I'm somewhat blanking on it, but I know Treasurer Gusson gave it at the retreat. But I do think if we're talking about getting towards our new money potential, we would be making that push in that last year to establish whatever we were going to do, if we were going to do another additional funds for the end of the facilities master plan bond levy time period. But I don't remember if that was the exact reason, but I just remember there was something said at the retreat about it.
I think the 4 years part of it was just, freshman year to senior year for student. So your kind of high school life cycle. The other thing I will remind folks is as we talk about new money for strategic plan, there is a delay, you know. Your tax year is a year behind your calendar year. So anything you do, there's going to be a lag before you start seeing the funding for it.
That was the caveat.
That's what I remembered.
Board Member Matt?
No, I'm just trying to track with you. So is that, yes, the life cycle of the high school student, but with the lag, are you saying that's also why it may be helpful with the 4-year instead of 3-year plan? Or am I?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Vice President Bolton?
I'm in agreement with what everyone's saying and what I think the summary is. I do think still hanging out there is whether or not we need all of these guardrails. And I don't know if we needed to have a discussion about that. I mean, looking at them, they're quite different from one another. They're all useful and good, but I don't know if all of them are. And we don't have to decide that tonight, but I wouldn't mind if the administration came back and said, maybe we don't need this one or that one, or whether we have, we think about it or what have you. Because some of them are a little bit more procedural than, and the procedural isn't fair, isn't aware, it's more concrete than lofty, or dealing with children and teenagers. So I just think that maybe if there's a continuing discussion, it might be as to which, if it's all the guardrails. Or we know we've flipped the goals now to the new goals, which is great. But I think you might want to review whether or not all 6 guardrails are of value.
I think what's applicable as I look at the interim goals and guardrails is we need to decide if we're going to do interim goals and guardrails, both, because there are things there, not just guardrails. So, I mean, I see value myself in them, or come up with a way to report those things. But I really, maybe they could be worded differently, but I think there is a benefit, as an example, the percentage of high school students participating in arts and athletics based on extracurricular activities will increase from a number to a number. There's benefit in that. So the reporting of it to me is significant. However, if it needs to look differently and say something differently, maybe we can work on that. But are we saying that we don't want to do interim goals and guardrails? Or are we saying that we do? I think that's the very first question I'm interested in. Board Member Crossett?
I go back to what I said earlier. I think we should continue to report on the guardrails as we go forward. It may be, to Eve's point, as we go through the strategic process, maybe there's a couple we drop because they're not that helpful. But I think for now, as long as the administration has a bandwidth, continue to report on them. I mean, they're out there for the public, and we should kind of honor that until we make a big shift to a new strategic plan.
Well, I think I'm going to give some homework to the board members. Let's go back and pull them and actually look at them. So Superintendent Murphy, can you send them out to all of the board members? I'm looking at this particular sheet. It's just, we approved it December 14th, 2022. If you could update the website with your goals, update this sheet with the goals that we landed on, and then list out the interim goals and the guardrails. And then we can kind of look over that, because I'd like to provide some direction to you going into the new year on what it is we need you to report on.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate that. We gave you one slide that has like a red or green where we are with guardrails. And then I thought maybe people don't exactly have that memorized, so we put a hard copy of the status of the guardrails from the start of the year, if that's somewhat helpful, and certainly can send it electronically.
That would be great. So board members will visit this one more time this year at the goal, my vote is that we keep them, but Vice President Bolton, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just need a point of clarification when you said interim goals. Are you talking about goals, yeah, interim goals of the new goals, not interim goals from the previous goals?
My understanding is that the superintendent has changed the interim goals herself. So it's her interim goals, not anything from previously.
Okay, it's interim goals for the, of
From
the
this
new
dimension.
goals.
Correct.
Okay, not the old goals.
That's why I think it's imperative that she send us what we need to work from so that we're all on the
That's
same
what
page.
that's what I'm asking.
That's
because we're not-
I think that's important. So let's have this conversation again when we all are looking at the same documentation. So Superintendent Murphy, can you send us your goals, interim goals, and guardrails of all of your goals? Make sense?
Then the 5 goals of Shauna Murphy for 2025, 2026 that the board approved. Yes. Send the guardrails, send an electronic copy of what you have a
What we're
hard
work-
copy of. Yes. And the interim goals from the current body of work.
Yes. And we're only going to look at what she sends us when we talk about it. Board Member Matt.
I'm with Board Member Bolton. I'm trying to, so I receive what has been shared. But again, as I discussed previously about the superintendent's goals, are we saying that those goals are now becoming the current goals ultimately for the strategic plan or just for this particular year? Right, but then that would mean we are abandoning the current goals that we already have in place. Yeah.
Wait, what are you talking about?
So we haven't necessarily reached those particular goals yet. And if we're switching them, is that your question that you're asking?
Right,
in
we
terms of
haven't reached those goals.
Reached them.
I'm trying to distinguish between the difference between the goals that we already have for the strategic plan. Are we saying that the superintendent's goals that she's established, those 5 goals, are now going to become the goals for the strategic plan, even if it's for 25, 26, meaning we're getting rid of, and I think this is what Board Member Bolton is asking as well, we're getting rid of what was once in place to now replace it with what the superintendent's goals are that were approved. Because the way that I interpret it initially is that while we still maintain the current strategic plan goals, the superintendent's goals would be ultimately what we're evaluating the superintendent on while still upholding and monitoring the goals from the current strategic plan.
That's the reason why I was on here, because you asked me that question and I was a little lost. So I'm deferring to my colleagues on this one. Board Member Lindy?
I think it's a good question. I don't think there's an answer.
Yeah.
I think people walked away from the previous meeting with different interpretations. I think that just means that the people up here are human beings. And so I think the idea that there be this piece that's sent out, and maybe my request would just be, can there be a clear prompt that like, what kind of feedback or ideas are you looking for from us in response to those? And then I think we got to get to closure on this. But I do think it feels pretty normal for people to have walked away with different understanding, and a perfectly healthy and good thing for us to do is to get clear together. So thank you.
Superintendent Murphy, I think I'm going to ask you to weigh in because it's a very valid question. And the question was asked to me and I did not know, nor would I be able to say that definitively for the whole board. So what are you thinking?
I thought it was clear 4 minutes ago. Sorry.
That's fine.
I thought when my goals were approved, the direction was those would be the 5 goals administration should focus on this year. Today, that's not what I think anymore. I think there are still some pause because the previous goals, board members don't feel have been thoroughly addressed. So I'm a little, I just need the direction from.
I think the
you want
only,
me to do.
it's just the strategic plan goals that is causing you pause, correct? So it's the strategic plan that is on the website has goals listed. And those goals are what we've been working under.
Yes.
We've set individual goals for you that we did whenever, last month. And so I think the question is, are we overriding the strategic plan goals, which are different than your goals? Are we saying those goals that we have voted on for you are now becoming the last year of the strategic plan, well, the 2025, 2026 year of the strategic plan, which means, A, that the website is off, and B, we would be moving 2026, 27's strategic plan goals differently, because what's posted now is different.
I thought when my goals were approved, that's what I was told to do. I thought today I heard you say to edit the website to be aligned to those 5, but now that's not necessarily what I'm hearing.
Well, Member Map, are you opposed to having the 5 goals that we're working for the superintendent be aligned with and immersed into the current strategic plan that is what we're working from?
I am. That's the point that I raised pretty much the entire meeting in terms of this discussion. Like I said, there's only 2 of the superintendent's individual goals that were approved that are in alignment with what the actual strategic plan was. And so my understanding and my assumption was that the superintendent's goals that were set were for this year and ultimately working to change the annual targets or the interim goals of the main goal. Again, we have not accomplished the overall targets for those main goals that are listed in the strategic plan. So I was approving the superintendent's evaluation or superintendent's goals under the premise that this would be her own individual goals that she would have been working towards and that we would have been holding her accountable to for the superintendent evaluation.
Vice President Bolton?
Yeah, this is why I posed the question, because I think there is some
Yeah, there's
confusion. First of all, I don't think we should add to more things for us to be overseeing. That's why I did propose that we have a reflective effort by both the administration and the board to see what had been accomplished based upon the current and hopefully previous strategic plan, and we have an understanding of that. But I do think that it's time to move to the next strategic plan after that reflective effort, and that we only have those 5 goals. And that is what we're evaluating the superintendent on, and it would be incongruent for me intellectually to have a group of things over here that we're monitoring as well as monitoring what we're expecting the superintendent to deliver. So I would be proposing we have a reflective period of time and assess the end of the current strategic plan. We've already voted and said we want to start planning the new strategic plan and have it done by June 30th. So I think that we're in that transition and that gets confusing. And I think it would be well worth everybody's effort for the administration to reflect on what was accomplished, what wasn't accomplished from the current / previous strategic plan, but it's time to move on now from the standpoint of really making true the importance of those 5 goals that we've said the superintendent needs to be having the administration work by.
Thank you. Board Member Lundy?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, this feels long and difficult. On the other hand, I think it's for a good reason, which is we're trying to get clarity. So I appreciate everybody's time on this. I had two things I wanted to say. The first one is, I think for me, it's helpful to see how much overlap there is between the old 5 and the 5 that are on the superintendent's evaluation. I know that technically Algebra 1 and third grade reading are the only ones that are exactly the same, but the third goal is about shrinking the gap in academic outcomes in sixth grade reading for low-income students versus non-low-income students. It is different from the way we were measuring the gap because the previous measure focused explicitly on different racial groups. I think the value behind goal 3 in both sets is very similar, which is we want better opportunities for all kids, regardless of zip code, in the city of Cincinnati, and we're going to hold the superintendent accountable for making meaningful progress on that. So on 1 and 2 and 3, high alignment. The fourth one used to be about college and career. Our fourth one is still about college and career, where we're focusing on a slightly different thing, but it's a thing that really matters, which is expanding the number of offerings that are higher than 6 points. I happen to think that's actually a better thing for us to focus on than where we were focused on. And the fifth one I know is different. We're swapping out graduation rates for a long-term strategic plan, but I think that's the right call. And so from my perspective, if we decide that we're only going to focus on the 5 that are in her evaluation, from my perspective, we're not losing a ton. We've updated our focus in a way that feels intentional. I still think our algebra goal is too low. I voted against that one. I lost. But on the others, I think there are good things for us to strive towards. That was my first point. My second one, look, where I started on all this during our committee of the whole was we should drop all the goals, all the guardrails, and the only thing we should focus on are the 5 things we approved in the superintendent's evaluation, and then let everybody go home. I've come around to the idea that there are important things in the guardrails that we want to continue to watch. But from my perspective, if what we're monitoring are the 5 pieces on her evaluation as the goals for this year, and the guardrails, because they're important things we want to hold on to there, that feels like plenty from my perspective. And to add more than that, I worry starts to dilute focus. But for that to work, there has to be real genuine accountability for those things. This can't be an excuse to kick the can down the road. And that's really important to me, and I wanted to say that out loud, because with the 5 we approved also needs to come some real accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Superintendent Murphy, what I'd like for you to do, because we don't need to keep badgering you, we're all saying the same thing over and over again. I think I like the idea of you creating for us a presentation or some sort of document, and you can share it before the next meeting, of where the overlap is for you. Board Member Lindy did a very good job of summarizing that, but I think the visual would be great. We've got your 5 goals. Where were we with regard to the strategic plan and those goals, and where are we now? That would be a great presentation for you. Additionally, and put your goals down there that we voted on. Additionally, I'd like for you to just look at the interim goals, look at the guardrails, find out the ones that pertain to your goals that we have already approved and that can be measured, that we're already measuring. You report on some things that directly impact your goals that we've already voted on, and then some of them that align with the strategic plan. Pick those out. Remember, Lindy says 5. I kind of think 5 to 6 is fine. But then provide that back to us so that we can see where we were with the strategic plan, how far are we off, and then where we voted for you to go, and then where you're proposing for us to go with regard to you and your team's design of the strategic plan. I think that would be a very good presentation. We can kind of align on something like that. Board Member Mapp will be able to see where there's overlap and where there's already alignment and where we're moving towards in totality. I think that sounds fair. We'll plan that for the next meeting, not the business meeting, the committee of the whole. We'll use that time there for that. And then hopefully we can, if we need to vote on something, we could do it at the next meeting, but we can also get some closure for you for this. We know we've got your 5 goals, but maybe you propose that we do a strategic plan just for, to kind of finish out, and then 2025, 2026, 27, the last year that's published there. But come up with something for us that has that data there. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. You've got one last presentation, middle school update.
We really don't have a presentation. We thought it was a conversation. We did put in the packet, we were specifically asked about attendance enrollment projection around middle school, and so we put that in for you to see and to review.
Okay.
But other than that, we did not really create a presentation.
And I know that you had planned something for us in December.
Yes,
So we'll
ma'am.
get some more in-depth information, and I think mentally, people may have a little bit more questions, but the data
And we
is
will,
here.
Dr. Moffitt, I apologize, on the scorecard that I think is coming the next business meeting, enrollment data.
Okay. Board members have questions?
I do.
Board member Weinberg?
Yes, so for the presentation, you said you'll have one in December on
Yes,
middle
ma'am,
school?
there was already scheduled a middle school and elementary school and a secondary ed presentation. And so that middle school one is scheduled now for December.
So I just made a list because after seeing this, I thought it was going to be a full presentation, and just seeing that it has the enrollment and attendance. So I just had a couple things that I would want to get some further information on, not just from me personally, but also community concerns. So I just wanted to know, how is the academic structure and the progress monitoring occurring at our middle schools? How is the parent engagement? And I can send this in an email if I need to. How is the parent engagement? What are the student outcomes for first quarter? How is transportation? How are athletics and extracurricular? And then from all of the schools, Ethel, Evanston, Hartwell, Pleasant Hill, Schroeder, and South Avondale, what are the needs and challenges and successes so far that we have seen, so that we know how to move forward? And then also, can you also remind us on what each of the focuses are for each of the schools as well?
You want that in an email? You want that now?
For December. No,
Okay.
since this isn't a presentation and it's just a kind of a sharing of enrollment numbers and attendance, I'd like that for the December presentation.
Can you follow that up with an email?
And I will follow it up with an email,
Thank you.
yes.
Vice President Bowen?
But all that you just asked for, do you want to wait until December for that, or?
That's fine. I don't know, are you prepared to answer any of those questions for today? But it would be fine for December since you are doing a presentation on it. I just want to make sure that that information is included.
Yeah, there are a few of these I can respond to.
It's at your pleasure, or I can wait until December.
All righty. So the focus for each school?
Right.
Focus for each school, Evanston is entrepreneurship. And they had that IB ad this year as well, linking to Withrow with their IB ad for this school year. What we did at Pleasant Hill is the public service work. Very excited about that. We have
Say that again for Pleasant Hill. Was that the social justice or what?
social justice
Okay.
at Pleasant Hill. Hartwell has the business focus, and then I'm thinking I'm gonna have Sierra come down so I don't get these messed up.
And is Hartwell no longer the STEAM focus?
Hartwell has STEAM, and I think there is a STEM component as well.
Okay.
Good evening. Ethel Taylor's Technology. And who am I missing?
I think that's all of them at this point.
What was the Ethel Taylor one again?
Technology.
What was the Ethel
Ethel
Taylor?
Taylor Technology,
So it's no longer the arts and communication?
or maybe I got it backwards. What do you have for South Avondale?
For South Avondale, STEAM focus.
Okay. So I believe Ethel Taylor.
Okay.
And it's fine if we
We'll have it
need to
for you.
come back in December.
make
I will
sure
email
it's-
you the list of every single
Yeah.
thing.
Thank
so
you,
that we
ma'am.
Well,
just
we
have
will,
acronym.
we will have that for you.
Perfect.
Okay, I think we probably should just wait and give you time to
We'll have
get it all through. Okay. Board Member Matt, got your mic off, on.
Yes, so I did prepare, having some questions, thinking that this was a presentation. I do have some concerns about the projection numbers that have been shared today in comparison to the projection numbers that were shared in the past. I went through all of at least the middle and junior high schools to compare those projections, and I've recognized that there are several misalignments with the projections, and that some of our schools are reflecting that they're under-enrolled based off what the projection was, or over-enrolled based off the projection was. And I recognize that there's obviously going to be some discrepancy because the projection is just a guess, but some of them reflected a very significant misalignment to what we were anticipating. And so can you speak to that, Superintendent Murphy? Because again, I don't know if the projections were changed throughout the period of time to get to where we are now, what we're seeing on the screen. And so I'm just trying to, make sure that I am tracking and processing what we have presently with what you're presenting. So for instance, I know that the initial projection for Ethel Taylor was 275. It's currently reflecting a projection count of 423. And it's showing that our current enrollment is at 358. So I'm just concerned or curious about how we are now at these numbers for the projection. And then also looking at the enrollment versus the attendance data. We recognize that several students are enrolled in all of our schools. However, the attendance in several of our schools are not reflecting maybe what the actual enrollment number would be. And so are we informed about if these students are actually in our schools and maybe just showing up, sometimes, or I know that they're on the roster, but are they actually accounted for as having been present and they're just absent? Because that definitely impacts the narrative of the chronic absenteeism. If it's reflecting that students are enrolled, but maybe they're not even attending the school, maybe they're at a different school, I don't know. But that impacts our chronic absenteeism. So has there been a deep dive or an investigative kind of study to assess, the trends with enrollment versus attendance?
So I'm going to ask Jeremy to talk about the projection piece, but on the attendance, what I will say is we have done the no-show process, so anyone who has just simply not shown up should have been removed to the no-show homeroom and addressed by the school social worker. The concern around attendance is not necessarily the same students absent Monday, Tuesday, et cetera, to your question.
Okay. So with the students that have been removed and assigned or categorized as the no-show homeroom, how long do what does that process entail to account for if they're actually a student within the district? I'm thinking about the financial or funding piece of that. I'm sure, students, we're receiving funding for those students. What does that mean if they are not actually, and truly enrolled as a student within our district? And when do we, I don't know, if we're receiving funding for them, do we have to reimburse for that funding if they're not in fact in the district? Like, how does that process work?
Yes, ma'am. So it's an ongoing process in terms of trying to locate where the students are. If they are in another schoolhouse, usually that's pretty easy for us to figure that out internally. If they have moved to a different district or a different location in the state or out of state, even worse. So we do watch this very, very carefully because it is an accountability piece, not just on attendance, but then it will also affect our accountability in terms of academics. So we monitor this on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you. But to the point around the accountability and the funding, what does that, so if we're getting payment for a student that we're saying is enrolled, and they are in fact not enrolled, and maybe have gone to a different district, we've gone through the rigorous process of trying to locate the students and all of the above, but they're no longer enrolled. What does that financial piece then look like for us? Do we still receive the funding? Does those dollars follow? Do they follow the student? What does that process
Yes, ma'am.
entail?
We receive funding for every student who is enrolled in our school district. So as long as we are still accountable and they're enrolled, then when the EMIS team reports those numbers, that's how our funding is determined.
Okay, I think you're answering part of it, but I think Treasurer Guston, do you want to weigh in?
Superintendent was doing a fine job. I will say the state pays us twice a month, and so they update the data, and there's a constant kind of adjustment to get to the right number. So it's not only the number of students we have enrolled, that changes as well, but it's making sure that we have students in the right classifications. So, there's different weights depending on, special needs students, they have a higher weight. English language learners have a higher weight, gifted students, even some of the career tech things, there's a higher weight. So it's not only having kids enrolled, it's also having their characteristics marked correctly so that we maximize that. And I will say our EMIS team works on that data year round. I know Jeremy's team and I, we talk quite a bit about it, just making sure that the students in the building are reflected in the reports that go to the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gallagher, Ms. Mapp asked a question about projection and a shift in projections. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, I apologize, I had to step out for just a minute, but I believe the nature of the question was the thought that there was something that the projections may have changed from one time to another. So without looking exactly, I would just, what projections are you looking at previously from last year? We had the multiple projections, if you recall, the fall based on the baseline all the way through the spring, which was the final revision we had when we did what we called the spring TAC, looking at the budget reductions and all of that work that happened. The numbers that are here are from that most recent spring numbers of the revised projections once we had completed the lottery and all of the associated numbers along behind that.
Okay, I would like to see, I don't necessarily recall that, but I would like to see that work, and this is something we can look at offline, so you can update me on that. But also what my question around the projection pertains to recognizing that we've had in the past a conversation around capacity and building utilization. And so what I have since learned is that enrollment doesn't necessarily fully align to what our capacity or building utilization is. So say, for instance, if a school's capacity, we'll say Pleasant Hill, for example, if a school's capacity is 650 students, right? Their enrollment numbers may not directly align with what that school's capacity is to hold the students. And so I'm just concerned because for Pleasant Hill specifically, I would say that school is maybe over enrolled or using I would say trending beyond what the building capacity actually is. Does that make sense?
It does. So, I mean, there's always a little bit of room with the capacity numbers from various changes that we've made. The capacity numbers that we use traditionally in any of these analyses are the FMP rated capacities that the building was either renovated or designed for during the FMP process. So the building was designed as a 650 building, meaning that it's supposed to be able to support the academic programming as well as all of the support structures with 650 students in the building. So that's what it was designed for. Obviously, with changes we've made, putting up walls, taking down walls, those can fluctuate a little bit. We try to capture as much of those as we could over the years, but there can be some differences. Typically, those go higher, not lower, when we actually walk the buildings and evaluate them. But this, without speaking specifically to South Avondale, I would have to look to see.
Okay, I mentioned Pleasant Hill. I'm not too
sorry,
familiar with
Pleasant
South Avondale, but as you talked about design, we know that Pleasant Hill was designed as an elementary school, and now we've configured it into a middle school. So while there may be a capacity for 650 students, that's considering maybe pre-K or K up until sixth grade. And so I think that's just really worth evaluating and assessing as we are continuing to move forward with our middle schools, and to make sure that there's more intentionality around how we are providing supports or strategic planning around our middle schools. Because again, I'll continue to say that there's a lot of supports that need to be in place to ensure that our students are successful. And I know, for having visited Pleasant Hill, I know that that's a school that is presenting to be overcrowded, right? And so again, yes, we may want to reach our enrollment target, but what does that actually mean in terms of the building capacity? So that was my concern there.
Board Member Craig.
So again, I think, appreciate you all providing this data, and then we'll have a bigger discussion at a later time with kind of more in depth as to what it all means and what it will look like for the district. I do think there's a couple things that I just wanted to maybe make sure that we're also bringing to the table. So one, I actually want to give some credit to reassessing the capacity of the building use for Riverview and Spencer, because I know in past ones we've looked at, we've had them as if both of them had the same building. And this one, it does appear to reflect a little bit more of the divide of the space that they're using within the building. I think that's also why in some ways, for instance, the Yoda Owen Center and some of these others, where they're not really meant to be at capacity. Like in theory, if we were at capacity in some of these spaces, that would be a problem more so. But I do think that's something we also maybe have to think about as a district, as to how do we utilize that, or how do we address that, because of the potential issues that came through with some of the state legislature requirements. That also gets into an additional point. The capacity of each building, and I think this is a hard one for us to do, because to Mr. Galloway's point, we did these on what we designed a building for at one point as part of the FMP. Some of those buildings have substantially changed, or we've created spaces that were designated as classroom that we're now using for something else. Or in some of these buildings, we're making them into administrative services within the building, or whether it's like a health center or something to that effect, that changes out in a lot of ways how the building structure is and how much of the building we can use. And I don't know how we reflect that into what the capacity numbers are. And in part, I'm thinking about this because some of our buildings are, I think on paper, look really low in capacity that may not be necessarily a true reflection of what the building usage is, right? Like, and so that's one aspect, and I think that's something that I think can be part of that bigger discussion about how do we talk about those things, how do we think about those things, and to ensure we are using the buildings to their full capacity. Where I do have a little bit of a worry, and I think this is just a longer conversation that we will have as a district, is the reality is that some of our buildings, the only way we expand into those spaces is to truly grow the district by thousands of students on like one side of the town, on one side of the city. And I think while we can grow and we'll continue to have opportunities to grow the district, I just don't know that we're going to keep growing in excessive numbers to make us meet some of those needs in those spaces. And that's what I worry about in a lot of ways if we're not having the real conversation with folks to say, some of our buildings, we can try as hard as we want to make them exist. And I worked in the district when we had the hard conversation around one of our buildings on the west side that literally there was a charter school and us in the building and something else, and it still didn't fill the building. So it's just a hard conversation that we're going to have at some point as to whether or not all of our buildings can be utilized in the capacity in the same way that they are now, and if there's something that we have to make a strategic decision around what we do with that. Because, again, looking at some of the numbers, even if we took enrollment numbers, they would still be under 50, around at 50 to 60 capacity, and that's not strategically where we want to be at for some of those buildings. The last thing I will say, and I think it's just helpful for us to, again, be thinking about, especially when we talk about our middle schools, is I think certain schools, we moved out folks for the purposes of creating space in the building to kind of calming some of the buildings down. Let me rewind back. So for instance, Hughes is an example for me that also was reevaluating what is the actual building capacity, because a good portion of the building can't be used. And so, or is that part of what we're considering as part of the F&P capacity? But to go back, I think we moved some of them out in an effort to take some effort to move students into a space where they could be in a more collective group with their own age and not as much with the older group of students. What I do think we have to be making a concerted effort about is maintaining, if not growing, the number of students who then are flowing into those higher grades. Because what I do worry about is that there are certain buildings that, yes, they were pretty close to capacity with 7th and 8th grade, but they weren't over. They weren't substantially over. There were a couple that were. But now it's going to look like we have a bunch of buildings that have that 60 to 70%, 70, 80% capacity. And what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the opportunities? Or is that a true reflection of what the building capacity is? So I just think maybe us, as we're strategically having those conversations about where our buildings look like in December, having the thought process around, is there a plan for where we're going that will align with whatever we decide to do as far as the strategic plan, or that's part of what we would have to talk about as part of the strategic plan goals? Because I do think there's some that are, there's been a lot of effort to maintain and a lot of effort to do great things with them, but I worry that we are at a point where we're probably maxing out the capacity that we can put into that school, and that's not a high level. And I think that there comes a point where we have a duty to the public to actually have the real conversation as to where we go from there.
Vice President Bolton.
Yeah, I do think that we have to maybe internally with our experts figure out the capacity piece really rather than necessary. And I know we don't over rely on whatever was the FMP capacity. I know you guys have been working through that to figure out what the capacity really is, but you're right. People will tell me, like, they went to Hughes, well, we had like 5,000 kids there. Why do you need to do it? Well, yeah, but that was like before there was like special ed. That was before you had any number of things that had to be housed in a building. My interest in the enrollment piece, Jeremy, is the enrollment across the district by grade band. Meaning, that's my old Wyoming approach, which is, are we going to have a senior class? How big is the senior class? And staffing was kind of done more by grade bands. For example, on the August report about the challenges that we were facing, there were some projections for all PK all the way through the 12th grade. And it appeared that for 6th and 7th and 8th grade, the enrollment in that chart versus the projection in that chart from August 4th, the enrollment was doing well in those 3 grade bands, better than the projection. But the total projection for all 12 grade bands was the enrollment was lower. So I'm just interested, have we seen a drop in the sixth grade band, the seventh grade band, or the eighth grade band, in part because we did this reorganization? Or have we, rather than building by building, for me, I just am trying to see the matriculation of where we are. I know we always have our PK numbers, they're remarkable, and ever fluid as the 3 and 4-year-olds join us. But I'm just looking at this chart that was distributed on August 4th under the presentation of opening challenges. And so where, in your judgment, where are we on across the district on sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade?
So and I brought up the chart, I figured it would just be easier so I could get a little bit more realistic numbers. So the last one I'm pulling from right now is from September 30th. I have the October 15th, but I haven't put it into a nice chart yet to where I can pull the numbers easily. So we're going to be a little behind, but.
September 30th?
September 30th.
Okay.
Correct. So in sixth grade, our enrollment was 2379 versus the projection of 2425, so we were 46 students under. Seventh grade was 47 students under, and eighth grade was 16 students over projection. So as a total, just looking across all of it, our biggest area of challenge right now from a projection comparative standpoint is in preschool. We're about 500 total students off of our original projection. 400 of those are in preschool, which we know those will continue to enroll, so we hope to have that closed, but that is where the bulk of the number comes from. From kindergarten through 12th grade, which are our funded students, we were 93 students off of our projection at our ADM, between September 30th and our ADM. So comparing overall, at the school levels, we certainly are seeing some different changes and different trends than what we've seen, as we've been based on the changes, but overall, our projections were, I believe that's about 0.2%.
Very close.
To exactly where we were with enrollment.
Could you repeat the enrollment for sixth grade and seventh grade more slowly? Is this these?
Do you just want the over-under projection, or do you want the actual number?
No, I'm happy to have the enrollment numbers for sixth grade.
2379 for sixth grade. 2,325 for seventh. 2,304 for eighth grade.
So that's, as you would look at those numbers versus whatever projections there were or enrollment that you anticipated, what's your analysis there?
Correct. So the sixth grade was 46 students under projection. The seventh grade was 47 under projection, and the eighth grade was 16 students over projection.
Thanks.
While you're there, Jeremy, I have a question.
Sure.
What was the enrollment last year of the fifth graders? So what my question is asking about is, how many students did we lose from the fifth grade to the sixth grade? Because I understand we're projecting, but I'm really interested in how many students left the district per grade level, fifth to sixth, sixth to seventh, seventh to eighth, and eighth to ninth, maybe.
I don't have it off the top of my head. You'd have to give me a minute if we want to.
That's fine.
Wait, I can pull it.
You can get it for the next meeting, because that's really what I'm interested in. I asked for enrollment versus attendance, because we keep getting, enrolled is a number of 600, but realistically, there was only 400 kids in the building, so that's different. And so that I was specific in my ask for the disaggregated data. But I also believe that we've lost students in part because of a lack of engagement for junior high specifically. We missed a lot of marks on being able to clarify to the community around what their expectations would be in moving and in opening our buildings. And that's an us issue. If I received one more competitor postcard, I was going to scream. And I had people asking, hey, is CPS sending out anything? Because they were receiving it. So I think that part of our problem was regarding engagement. What I'm specifically interested in, since you have that data, and not right now, but for the next one, is the decline in enrollment from those grade bands that could have been attending these schools. And so that's what I'm looking for.
If there is decline.
If there isn't, then you'll say that, but my guess would be there may be. I'm also interested in capacity from a legislative standpoint. I particularly took a hit with regard to the community because there is that Ohio Revised Code that talked about the capacity of our buildings, and I understand how we're defining it. Unfortunately, we don't quite know how the state is going to be judging our buildings that they can close. And so this is particularly interesting to me with regard to a capacity issue because of that. And wanting, I'm not interested in moving chess pieces around. I'm interested in true growth. I'm also not interested in closing buildings because we use that on one hand. We need to close specific buildings for low enrollment, but then we're not using it in areas where there's clearly low enrollment and we're not engaging. So that's a part of what I'm very much interested in for the next meeting is capacity and a plan to grow, to truly grow, not just move pieces on the board, but to truly grow, which includes engagement and communication and building that that we haven't seen significantly. And I'm interested in the data around those grade bands transitioning from one to another in corridors that they could be going to, that we've implemented this year. So I'm looking forward to the presentation. I think Board Member Weinberg has also sent some questions, and I'm kind of looking forward to the updated data information. My next inquiry would be putting discipline on those enrollment numbers, but that's definitely, we can look at it for the semester or for the first quarter and the second quarter, but that would be the next piece that I think is super significant. And looking at it not only for middle and junior high, but around some of those other under-enrolled buildings to compare it to, is it just a junior high, middle junior high issue, or is it truly, a building-specific issue? Board members, so we will get a presentation in December around more in-depth middle school data. All right.
Can I just
yeah.
ask, Superintendent Murphy, can you share, I guess, maybe some of the expectations for the presentation that will be forthcoming in December, some of the areas of discussion?
Well, we can definitely include the areas Board Member Weinberg mentioned in particular, and if there's anything else that board members are interested in, we can definitely include it. We have already had a conversation around the enrollment question and the discipline question, but we also wanted to give some highlights in terms of what things are going well in each of the middle schools.
Okay, and just if possible to add to that, if you can have a component where it's outlining what the initial plan was for the middle schools and then comparing it against where we are now. Thank you.
We are cooking with grease. All righty. A proposed consent agenda has been distributed. Do board members, the superintendent, or the treasurer have any exception items to the consent agenda? I'm sorry, Treasurer Gusson.
You were expecting me to, I do have a couple things in the treasurer's report.
Okay.
Just on page 7, the amendment for Hamilton County Educational Services Center. Apologize, and we were cleaning up, sometimes we clean up the text, and, we read OT as overtime, was actually occupational therapy. So apologies for that. That is the contract for extended or additional occupational therapy hours. And then the other one is on the then and nows. The first then and now, lines 1 through 10, is not actually a then and now. The issue is the invoice came in from the vendor. with a different date, but our folks, both the vendor and folks in curriculum pointed out that services had not started before the PO. And so I verified that with both of them. So it is not a true then and now.
Board members, any other clarity? Vice President Bolton?
I want to thank the treasurer for looking into the exception that I was going to be making, and glad that we got that corrected. Thank you. Clarified, not corrected, I'm sorry.
Whoa, wow. Board President, Board Member Matt.
Just would like to abstain from the treasurer's report, page 14.
Page 14? Okay.
Any others? My usual suspects over here to my right. All right, Treasurer Guston, please call the voting roll for the passage of,
Wait.
I'm sorry,
we
I'm
need a-
sorry, we got to have a motion, I'm sorry. I'm so
So
sorry.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the corrected language on the treasurer's report.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Now it's on you, Treasurer Guston.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Bolton?
Yes.
President Moffett?
Yes. Do we need to review the assignments that were, that were made? Board Member Craig?
I would just say, we don't necessarily review it, but I think the request from Board Member Weinberg should be included as an assignment, since it's actually a specific task that we're asking the superintendent to do. It's already been shared with her as well as with the board, so I think it's fine to include that in.
So would you like me to make the assignment?
Formally?
Okay,
Yeah.
so yes, I would like to make an assignment that the superintendent will get back to the full board in her presentation in December. I have shared the email with Ms. Phyllis, and that email has been shared with all board members as well.
And we've got an assignment for the goals, guardrails. I don't think we need to go through that again, but I think she's got a clear strategy for presenting 2025, 2026 goals as voted on, and the last year of the strategic plan and any interims. So we've got that assignment clarified. Superintendent, did you need us to repeat that? I think you have it. Okay. And Board Member Matt?
Just the assignment around the middle schools, what the initial plan was before the Phase 2 process, and comparing it against where we are now. Again, opportunities to assess and evaluate areas of improvement or things that are working well, Superintendent Murphy discussed. And then I do have another assignment, but it's completely different from what we've discussed today. Wanting to get an update about our central enrollment process, specifically as it pertains to our students with disability supports, to make sure that they are enrolled in a best fit school for them, as well as that they are receiving the supports that they need in terms of whether they are in a gen ed class or if they are in a particular unit. So if you could provide us with an update around that process. I've received some concerns from community members about the challenges there. And so, and also because we've had a parent share today about making sure that IEP rights are honored, if you could provide us with an update.
And I just have one more kind of lightweight assignment. I'd love to get an update on Metro, and we've heard that there's still some concerns around these passes, and so our team has been able to share what the expectation was with Metro, but there's still some significant concerns. I know Ethel Taylor has had a bus stop change right in front of their building, and that is causing some of the bus stop is not there. And it's causing some of their students to miss school and or be late to school. And so specifically around that particular building, Metro has moved the stop, and it is adversely impacting the transportation of those students. But I'd also like to get some sort of idea on what buildings are still having trouble, because we hear it, but then when we inquire, it's always, no, there's no problem. So we need to have an understanding formally so that we can let Metro know. So transportation is a concern for me. Vice President Bolton?
Yes, this is I think one of the issues at Ethel Taylor is the construction on that street. Just tried to get on it myself. This is a specific one to the treasurer, if it pleases the rest of the board. I've been told by some folks that should know some things that we would be well advised, and this would be helpful to our communication with the public, if we were able to explain, we talked about how many millions of tax revenue, state revenue that didn't come our way. And it really was still single-digit millions, if I recall. But I've been told that if we look at what if the fair funding plan had actually been kept, how many millions of dollars would we have gotten? So there's an assignment. I don't know if that's an information request or an assignment, but it will require you to do some things. But I think that it will be useful as we explain things to the public. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, anything else? Board Member Weinberg? Oh, okay. So the chair will now gladly entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Is